All right, let's get a drive time Monday afternoon, 11 minutes past the hour of 2 o'clock. It is springtime outside. Finally, we made it. We've arrived, at least for now. About 65 degrees and sunny here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. A couple of clouds in the sky, but blue skies mostly. It is a beautiful, beautiful Monday afternoon. And as it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic. Porter Larson behind the glass producing the program today. We are jam-packed. After a really fun sports weekend, the NCAA tournament rolls on. The madness of March rolls on. And a lot of chalk, man. Not a lot of upsets. Quite frankly, of the 16 teams left, I would characterize none of them as Cinderellas. We'll get to it. We'll talk about the games that took place over the weekend. We'll talk about the Sweet 16 as it gets underway coming up on Thursday. And for the third time in school history, BYU advances to the Sweet 16. They're going to take on Alabama Thursday at about 5:09 Mountain Time on CBS. So we'll talk some BYU basketball, some college basketball on the program today. Donovan Mitchell and the Cleveland Cavaliers rolled into town and smoked the Utah Jazz. The Jazz continue their losing ways. NBA season, stretch run, playoffs right around the corner. Jazz going to welcome in the Memphis Grizzlies coming up tomorrow. And the Jazz high speed ahead, too, locking in one of the three worst records in pro basketball. And if you watched Duke over the weekend, you understand why. We'll talk a little Cooper Flag today. We'll talk a little pro prospects today on the program as a result of where we're at with our current pro basketball landscape. Cooper is really, really good. Every time I hone in and watch him play, I leave more and more impressed. So we'll talk some NBA draft, the draft lottery, I believe is the first week of May, thereabouts. And that's the next night as a Jazz fan. You can expect to have any sort of excitement because if the Jazz do luck into that number one pick, it changes everything instantly. So we'll get to some NBA basketball, some Jazz basketball on the program. Spring football for the Utes started on Thursday of last week. Coach Witt did some media, some sound from players, and Jason Beck, new offensive coordinator. Devin Dampier, new quarterback, a grip of new skill position players, leaving Smith Snowden to be very impressed. At Utah's offense so far, it is spring ball. It's March. We have no clue what it's going to look like come August and September, but it is college football. It is topical. And speaking of college football, 25 Utes and Cougars were down in Dallas last week for Big 12 Pro Day. A lot of them left a lot of NFL scouts very impressed. So there is some college and some pro football to get to, even though right now the madness of March, college basketball and NBA basketball dominating the headlines. RSL went down a man on Saturday. It was a rough red card and could not find the back of the net, so they lose again 1-0. And ultimately, the question continues to become whether or not Real Salt Lake is actually going to find some reinforcements prior to the transfer window closing in April that can help Pablo and his staff actually score some goals. Because I'm not a soccer expert, but if you don't score goals, my quick calculation is you're not going to win soccer games. Hot take on a Monday. The Utah Hockey Club is just simply not going to make the wild card. I hate to break it to you, but I've been talking about this for quite some time now. A good win over the weekend against Tampa Bay. They welcome in Detroit tonight, but it is a 6-point gap, I believe, with 12 games to play. So barring something, the problem is the St. Louis Blues somehow have just started to fly. And so the Utah Hockey Club has not been able to keep up. And so I think it's probably time to say it's been a fun year, but it's probably going to come to a close after the next 12 games. But it's great to have NHL hockey here in our market. So a lot to get to. Jam-packed show, the latest on Alex Jensen, the Utah basketball coach, filling out his staff. Our first guest right out of the gates on a Monday will be Josh Furlong. So we'll get some Utah football and basketball with Josh. Spencer Litton, our buddy from BYU TV, Cougar Sports Nation, will stop by to help us understand just how excited that fan base is for this run from Kevin Young, year one for Coach Young and this basketball program. They'll march on to the Sweet 16 for the first time since Jimmer Fredette was making a rain down in Provo. Jeff Johnson. Jeff was one of the best pure scorers that I ever saw play. In high school, he was a problem. Played college ball for Rick Majerus at the University of Utah. So we'll bring in Jeff today to talk some Alex Jensen, some Utah basketball. Sarah Todd stops by from the Deseret News. Sarah wrote a piece a couple weeks ago that we've been referencing a lot on the show because Sarah's very good at her job. Whenever she writes on the Jazz, I like to kick the tires on her content, so we'll bring in Sarah today as well. Should time allow, we'll get you some sound from Utah Spring Ball from Coach Witt, Jason Beck, Devin Dampier, Wayshawn Parker, and others. It's a brand new team, brand new energy. Coach Witt talked about it quite a bit during his media availability after practice last week. So a lot to do on this Monday afternoon. Josh Furlong, Spencer Linton, Jeff Johnson, Sarah Todd, me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners. Happy Monday to you. And that guy, Porter Larson.
Yo.
Monday afternoon. How's your Monday, pal?
Monday's gone swell. Not as good as the weekend. And, of course, the Thursday, Friday, the 4 days of nonstop basketball that I think are my favorite days in sports. It's hard to really compare anything to what you see during the first week of college basketball. But Monday's gone well, even though we don't have as much hoops on today. We got the ladies keeping us at bay until we get to some Sweet 16 action. But, yeah, good weekend, good Monday. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. It's like my favorite time of year. This tournament, I know it's been chalky. I know we have not had a lot of upsets. I know Utah basketball's not involved, but I record the games because, you know what? Let's get to it because I've got some things to get off my chest about this tournament. So before we get to Josh Furlong on a Monday afternoon, courtesy of our good friends at Prize Picks, it is time now for your opening tip.
Welcome to The Drive with Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. Now into the studios of ESPN 700 to set the scene for the show. The opening tip of The Drive is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the code ESPN700 and run your game with Prize Picks.
NCAA tournament, the madness of March. What a great weekend. A lot of really, really fun games. A lot of chalk in this tournament. Only 4 conferences represented. And in my opinion, this is just my opinion. Well, you know that. That's implied because I'm about to talk into a microphone and say something. There are no Cinderellas left, okay? Arkansas is not a Cinderella. John Calipari has 4 pro prospects. They just were hurt all year long. They got off to a rough start because they had bad health. St. John's was my pick for the Final Four in that region, coming out of the West, where Florida looks really good too. But Arkansas is not a Cinderella. That is a team on paper that probably is a top 3 or 4 seed. Technically, they're a 10 seed. They're going to take on Texas Tech, and Texas Tech's a really good team. I think that's going to be a rough game, but there are no Cinderellas left in this tournament. And what does that do for your interest as a consumer? Can't really speak to that. I will say it doesn't affect the quality of play. I mean, you have the best teams in college basketball left, and so I guess there's that. But I thought what we had over the weekend was an excellent kind of a statement on where the game of college basketball is. I know a lot of college football fans around here, a lot of college basketball fans around here, not necessarily thrilled with the state of collegiate athletics. And yes, transfer portal, NIL, they have changed the landscape. But a showcase for what college basketball can be when these players, are able to show you just how much they care about this stuff. I mean, when's the last time you saw an NBA player, an NBA coach in tears after a game? And you can say, yes, there's the business element of it. College basketball is big business, has been for a long time. But these young men, these coaches, they care a lot about the outcomes of these games. And ultimately, if you've ever played at any level, high school, AAU, into college, if you were good enough or lucky enough, the final time you play a game with your friends, the final time you play a basketball game with your teammates, and then you realize after the game is over, that's it, it's not happening again, it hits you a different way when you realize you're going to live the rest of your life without competitive basketball, and you have worked so hard with your brothers, you've worked so hard with your teammates to accomplish something special, and you fall short in your sojourn into a tournament or whatever, it hits you big time. And we saw a lot of that over the weekend. So a couple of takeaways from what we saw over the weekend. Ultimately, if you are a Jazz fan and you are wondering, what are the Jazz doing? Okay, why can't they figure it out? It's been 3 years of just embarrassing results and bad basketball. Cooper Flagg is legit, and he's got game for days. I mean, watching that Duke-Baylor game, I intentionally made sure I was in front of my television for that because I wanted to see Cooper. I wanted to see VJ Edgecombe. If the Jazz don't get the #1 pick, if they fall to 3 or 4, or heaven forbid, below that, I don't think they're going to. We'll get to that later in the show. VJ's a really good player. He's probably a top 5 prospect, but Cooper Flagg, he just has everything you would want from the vantage point of a pro scout to be a legitimate cornerstone right away for your basketball team. Now, in case you're not familiar, Cooper Flagg reclassified. He should be a senior in high school right now. He's 18 years old and just turned 18 in December. He's a young 18-year-old, and he just pops right off the screen. And if you didn't watch the game and he pulled up the numbers, you're like, wait a second, 18 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists. Yeah, that's good. It's not great. It's just the way he plays and always makes the right basketball decision on both ends of the floor. You know, the broadcast team talking a lot about his defensive prowess, you know, Bill Raftery, Grant Hill. If you hone in on Cooper at any point of the game, on offense or defense, transition or half court, you know, regardless of the offensive set or the defensive attack, he's always in the right position and he always makes the right play. He can get out in transition. He can dunk on your head. He can shoot it from 3. He's a skilled passer. He's legitimately 6'10". And I know Jazz fans have had a difficult time kind of digesting losing in a way that, quite frankly, we've never really seen here. This is an unprecedented approach from this new ownership and this front office, one that's been clunky, quite frankly, one that has not been executed very well. If all of this pathetic play and clunky decision-making and, quite frankly, oftentimes looking like they're completely lost, if it all leads to when Lottery Night is held, like I said, I think it's the first week of May, if this all leads to the Jazz grabbing the number 1 pick and getting this kid, it's been worth it. He's that special. He would instantly become the best prospect that we've had here probably ever, and that includes John and Carl. Now, John and Carl went on to be 2 of the best ever at their positions, but when they were drafted, they weren't expected to be. I'm talking about initially a prospect in this market. We've never had one like Cooper Flagg. So one of the main takeaways over the weekend, watching Cooper Flagg and Duke just smoke Baylor. And Duke, breaking news, I picked them to win the national championship. They're the most popular pick when it comes to ultimately people picking the national championship because they're dialed in, man. They're really, really good. And I would be stunned if they lost. But the crazy thing about this tournament is ultimately, if you have a bad shooting night, if your star player rolls an ankle, then, you're in for a tough night. And that's where teams get upset. So main takeaway, Cooper Flagg, awesome. If you're a Jazz fan, you should check it out. We're going to talk some BYU hoops with Spencer Linton coming up, but let's give Kevin Young and the BYU Cougars a lot of credit for the 3rd time in Brigham Young University history. BYU goes to the Sweet 16. They took care of a really good Wisconsin team, and they just were offensively, BYU was lights out. And I think that's a double-edged sword if you're a BYU fan, because Wisconsin is a solid team, a 3 seed. They've got a pro in the Tanjay kid who had 37 points. But BYU won by 2 points while playing literally a historic offensive basketball game in the history of the NCAA tournament. When you look at how they shot from 3, they were the first team in the NCAA. They were the first team in NCAA history to go 49% from the floor, at least 46% from 2, 93% from the line, and 11 turnovers and 91 points. Those 5 numbers combined, that's never happened. So BYU had to make history to beat a good, solid Wisconsin team. What does it mean for their next opponent, Alabama, who was in the Final Four a year ago? We'll get into that coming up in a little bit. I think it's going to be a tough one. Alabama's a 4.5-point favorite. And with the way BYU's making shots right now, I'm not saying they can't get it done. I'm saying if you needed a historic offensive game to barely get by Wisconsin, it's pretty tough to expect that 2 games in a row. And they're going to have to be better, quite frankly, to beat an Alabama team who's better than this Wisconsin team. They're actually pretty similar. We'll get to that coming up in a bit. But Kevin Young, year 1, man, 26 wins, 3rd in conference. Now they're on to the Sweet 16. If they're able to upset Alabama on Thursday, you can make an argument that this is the best team in the history of BYU's basketball program. So give them a lot of credit. And I was watching the Kentucky game, and Mark Pope, Jackson Robinson, former BYU Cougar on Mark's roster. He's hurt, unfortunately. Colin Chandler, Davis County kid, really good player. He decommitted from BYU to follow Mark to Lexington. Remember, Mark badly wanted Richie Saunders, and he badly wanted Dallin Hall, those 2 specifically. And both those players hit the transfer portal and nearly left. Those 2 follow Mark to Kentucky. We're talking about a different basketball team. So Got to credit Kevin Young and his staff for kind of re-recruiting those two linchpins. Yegor Demon, sorry, BYU fans. If you wanted him back, guess what? It's not happening. He's been so good. He is going to get gone. He's going to be a top 10 NBA draft pick. And everybody right now for that team is doing their job at a very, very high level. But it's about to get real as Alabama's the opponent coming up on Thursday. We'll dig into that game a little bit later on. Josh Furlong will join us right out of the gates. We'll do some Utah spring football and some Utah basketball. Alex Jensen officially announced a week ago today. Before we catch a break, let me tell you about my friends at Prize Picks, which is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks. It's really simple. If you've heard a lot of people, maybe in your ecosystem, a lot of people you know, or you're just on social or whatever, talking about sports gambling, you're like, hey, maybe I can make some money on that. Well, this is the easiest way to do it without having to learn the nomenclature or all the terms, spread over, under, all that stuff. You don't throw that out the window with Prize Picks because all you do is pick more or less on two-player stat projections. So, as I referenced, the Jazz welcome in the Grizzlies tomorrow. We'll just use that game as a for instance. On Prize Picks for Jazz Grizz, you would pick Ja Morant more or less than 7.5 assists, something like that. Go check the lines. Lowry Markkanen more or less than 22.5 points. Pick more or less. You get those two right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Go get their free money. At least do that. See if you like it and go from there. So if you download the Prize Picks app today, and if you use the promo code ESPN700, you get $50 when you place your first $5 bet. You do not even need to win that first $5 bet. You just get the 50. As long as you download the Prize Picks app and use the promo code ESPN700 with our good friends at Prize Picks, run your game all season long. Josh Furlong bats leadoff on a Monday right here on ESPN 700. Beautiful, beautiful Monday afternoon. 65 degrees and sunny. Feels like spring has finally arrived. Hope you had a great weekend, jam-packed with some college hoops, maybe some NBA, a little hockey as well. Our first guest out of the gates on a Monday. Josh Furlong covers the Utes for KSL. Josh, happy Monday, man. How you doing?
It's a great Monday. How are you, Spence?
I'm well. First things first, how's the bracket? How your brackets doing?
You know, that first 2 days, I actually probably did the best that I've ever done. The last 2 days, not as good, but it was still decent, so can't complain.
Yeah, my mistake is actually picking upsets, like silly me, because this tournament in the past, had upsets. And Josh, from my vantage point, there are 0 Cinderellas left. Do not sell me on Arkansas. John Calipari has like 4 NBA guys on that roster. They just weren't healthy to start the year. Like, when you look at 1 through 16, it appears that at least this year, Cinderella is nowhere to be found.
Yeah, it's kind of odd. I mean, I think in the NIL era where you can disperse the talent a little bit more, basketball for whatever reason has more coalesced around a lot of these top teams. I mean, you're seeing that in the SEC where you're getting a lot of these teams there, and the competition has been great. I don't know if it's something to be concerned about moving forward. I'm not going to go Stephen A. Smith and say it's the death of college basketball, but at the same time, it's upsetting to some extent. You want to go out there and you want to root for a 12 seed or a 13 seed to go in and make it to the Sweet 16. So it's different, that's for sure. And I think if we start to see more of that, I think maybe the NIL is much more benefiting the top teams in college basketball. We've seen in football where it's been much better to kind of spread it out. So really curious to see how this goes, but it's not something to be totally worried about, but it's something fun to talk about.
Spend the majority of the conversation today on a bevy of topics regarding the University of Utah, but before we get there, you got to give Kevin Young a lot of credit, and they now have proof of concept. They certainly won the press conference with all the conversation about his NBA pedigree and how much money they were paying him, and the conversation about BYU leaning into NIL, funds allocated towards basketball in a way that they weren't and probably still are not towards football, which is a little bit of a zig when everybody else is zagging. But 26 wins year one, competing in conference at a high level, finishing top 4, signing the #1 recruit in the country next year in AJ DeBanza. And now, for the third time in BYU history, Josh, they are dancing into the Sweet 16. What do you make of this story?
I mean, I think it's great for BYU. I mean, I think for a while there was a real stretch where, I think people starting to get nervous. Like, is this really going to work? And, I think that loss to Utah really kind of galvanized the team and got them moving forward. It was a kind of turning point in their season in terms of how they were able to move forward. But I think what makes them so successful is just their deep team. Kevin Young's not afraid to go 10, 11 deep into his rotation, but they've all been able to be effective in their own rights. You got some guys that are just going to come in there for their defensive presence. You got some guys that, like a Richie Saunders, who's obviously going to be one of their best players, who comes in there and does well. You got Kaba, who just absolutely just dominates that rim. And they're finding ways to play complementary basketball. And so they're a team that's playing loose. They're playing like they know that you can't lose. This is a team that is doing really well. And so it's been really fascinating to watch. Obviously, they've bought a lot of their talent, right? Like, that's the name of the game right now. And I think that was the big worry of what was going to happen. But I think so far the proof of concept has worked. And I think, that's only going to grow for BYU. I've heard rumors that their NIL is improving even for the next year. Obviously, the rumors that we've heard is 7 million, 5 million, whatever you want to say. I think it shows that they're making a big investment in basketball. And if it's paying off like this and they're going to Sweet 16, that's going to give the donors and the boosters, more incentive to want to be able to put money in. And if that's the case, what's it going to mean for football? Maybe they start seeing the taste of success in basketball. Does that mean that BYU continues to improve in football and kind of grow there? It's harder to influence it from a football standpoint, but I wouldn't at all be surprised to see if this is kind of the model to kind of push BYU more into the athletics world than it has been.
I'll leave the pissing contest online as far as fans saying, oh, you're copying our style, or wait, we shouldn't hire Alex Jensen because it means we're copying BYU. Breaking news in the world of sports, everybody copies everybody if you find something that works. And I think the Alex Jensen hire, regardless of anything BYU has done or will do, is a home run, at least for now. So, since you and I last spoke, this news has become official. We'll get to the hire that he has made and potentially the hires that he will make moving forward to fill out the staff. But again, putting aside the pissing contest for people that live online, is there anything that Utah can be excited about while watching this run from BYU based off of Alex's NBA pedigree and the way Kevin's been able to succeed?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to look at this and say, like, look, you can make a big change in 1 year. Now, I would argue that BYU obviously had some talent and they had some pieces together that made this first year for Kevin Young much better. Probably more so than, well, I know more so than what Utah has. So, I don't know that Utah fans can go into this and fully expect a similar type of situation. And if it doesn't work, it's a failure on Utah's part. But I think the model's kind of there in the sense that, you can get guys that have NBA talent, at least, or have seen NBA talent. They understand, what it takes to be able to play at the next level, and that's attractive to other players. But at the end of the day, you've got to invest in the funds, right? You've got to bring the NIL money. You've got to get a fan base that's excited to do it. It's not just going to be all on Alex Jensen and all on his coaching staff. Those things are going to matter. Obviously, they want to be able to have that experience and be able to see a good coach. But it's kind of more of a whole level effort, right? The way that BYU has worked isn't just because of Kevin Young. Obviously, his hires were great. The recruiting was great, and they were able to get investment from donors. If Utah can't get all of that to work, it's still not going to be a situation that is beneficial for Utah. So, like you said, you can say they're copying BYU. You can, whatever, you can be upset about that. The reality is like there has to be a full investment into the program or else it's not going to work. And if it doesn't work that way, then you've really kind of hurt the name of more of what the name Utah has, just simply because you tried it with an alum, a beloved alum no less. And if it doesn't work, that's a real dangerous spot to be, because then you have nowhere real to go.
So Alex has made his first coaching hire. Rafael Chilius, who has been around for a long time, both in the landscape of college and pro basketball. Before we get to potential other hires, now that we know a little bit more about Coach Chill, as his Twitter profile is called, what should Ute fans know about the first assistant coach that AJ decided to go with?
Honestly, this is a brilliant hire, right? Like you may not know the name, but the fact that this was his first hire shows kind of the emphasis that the Utah wants to make in terms of recruiting. They want to be able to go in there and compete at a high level with a lot of these other programs. They may not be at the Dukes or at this point even BYU level where you're getting Devonta, but you're putting a strong emphasis on a guy that has had a great relationship with identifying talent. He's brought in a bunch of players that have eventually seen the NBA ranks. This is a guy that has great relationships around the league. A lot of people, around the country respect him and they love who he is. He's been involved in the high school ranks. He's been involved in the collegiate ranks, the NBA ranks. He's got every level at his disposal, and he does it with a level that just identifies phenomenal talent. So, if he can get just a little bit of that at Utah, I mean, I think this is a home run hire. You put a lot of the eggs in the basket onto him in terms of recruiting, especially while Alex is in the NBA still working with the Mavericks. This becomes the Chilla show, right? Like Coach Chill is going to be out there, and if he's calling your name, that probably means good things. And so I'm really fascinated to see what this recruiting looks like under Utah, because I think you're starting to get more interest. You're already seeing that with people that have ventured into the portal. Guys that probably weren't going to be connected to Utah in the past are starting to at least consider Utah. They still have to win those battles, but you're at least being involved in those conversations, and I really believe that's because of him.
I'm old enough to remember when it was like Jerry Sloan, Phil Johnson, and Gordy Chiesa, or Coach Majerus, Coach Judd, and like Dick Hunsaker, and like two assistant coaches, one trainer, and that's all you needed. Well, now there's 8 assistant coaches, a couple of other staffers. This staff is going to take some time to fill out, but I am kind of surprised that a week after AJ's announcement, we only have one official hire. Josh, any insight as to what is next, what could be next, and where we're at in that process?
Yeah, I mean, Alex Jensen wants to take this slowly, right? Like, you obviously have to do it the right way, and he wants to not just make rash hires. He wants to go into this and try to find guys that are going to be complementary to his system, complementary to kind of the program that he wants to run. which is going to be very NBA heavy, right? Like he's going to try to pull from the ranks of the NBA world, which obviously is still pretty heavily involved as the season is wrapping up soon, but it's still heavily involved as teams are in the playoffs or whatever that may be. And so I think you're gonna see this be a little bit slow. You're gonna see him taking his time, but he wants to build the staff that is going to be complementary to what he wants to do at Utah. And so there's going to be some international flavor probably, trying to get guys that have experience in recruiting that way or developing talent that way. You still have the potential for Andre Miller, which I hear there's still progress being made there, and there's a good likelihood that's going to happen. But I think you've got a guy that's not trying to rush things just to rush it. I think they're being very intentional in what they're doing here, and you're going to get it piece by piece. I don't think this is going to be a rush by any means, but I don't think that's a bad thing. Like I said, I think he's got his recruiter. He's got the guy that's really going to start selling the program to everybody. He can start selling the program to everybody. The rest is then figuring out who it's going to be. Are you getting a GM? Are you getting this assistant for the bigs or guards or whatever that may be? I think that can come, right? Like you're in no hurry to get there. Obviously, players want to know what they have on the roster, but this isn't something that he's trying to rush by any means.
Did you hit a six-way parlay on Prize Picks? Am I seeing this on your Twitter correctly?
I did. The very first day, I put 3 slips out there, and one of them hit. So it was a good day, that's for sure.
Nice, man. Lunch on you next time. Well done, man. I know you alluded to the Andre stuff, but let me follow up about Andre Miller, who continues to be the name. Certainly, all my friends ask me about, Utah fans, wondering if that's going to be a reality. Any insight as to whether or not this is getting close to getting over the line?
Yeah, I think it's close. He's still trying to finish out his G League situation, and all indications that I've got from the people that I've talked to have said that he wants to be here. And I don't know what the contract details will be, what involvement that'll be, but everybody that I've talked to about this has said that this is headed that way, right? Things could change. People make changes all the time, but I think if there's interest on both parties, there's no reason this can't get done. It's just a matter of kind of the timing and kind of when things line up. So I don't think people should worry too much. I think it's just a matter of trying to get everything finished with the NBA, the G League, that kind of stuff, and then things will kind of ramp up a little bit more.
All right, week 1 of spring ball. I got rolling last week on Thursday, spring football up on the Hill. We had a little media availability for the coaching staff and the players. Look, I say it every year. Spring ball is just a reason for guys like you and I to talk about the sport that most people around here prefer the most. And it's always fun to hear from Coach Witt, and it's always nice when there's a little bit of new blood in the program, new players, new coaches. I don't know that I've ever heard Kyle say positive energy as much as I heard him say, I think it was Friday during his media. So vibes are high, but it's spring, So what are some of the things that you're hoping to learn? Because like I said, the one exception to this year's kind of go around with spring ball is there are new coaches and players to kind of get to know a little bit, Josh. So spring football up on the Hill for the Utes. What are you looking out for?
Yeah, I think just kind of sticking with what you said with that vibe, I think that's a big part of what could make this team successful. I think the last 2 years were a real drag on the program, and that's not to say that there was huge fractures in the locker room or anything. There's your standard stuff, and maybe it got a little worse last year just because everybody was tired of losing. But I think that's kind of the difference with what's going on right now. The fact that Kyle Whittingham's pointing it out does kind of specify that there is a difference, right? That there seems to be a much more up-tempo vibe, and guys are excited to be together and everything. But it's still new, right? It's the first day of spring camp, and guys are learning each other. They're excited to get out on the field and kind of showcase their talent. But it's going to get much more challenging after this. But I think, this becomes a real intriguing spring camp, probably more than most. Just simply because there's so much turnover in personnel, and so you've got a lot of interest on that offensive side. I said, I probably even said it on your show, I think there was a real benefit for Utah missing out on a bowl game, and that was simply so that they could be able to get a full reset on offense. And so now we get the opportunity to kind of see if it works, right? They obviously got Devin Dampier. They got Wayshawn Parker. They got a lot of these other guys that seemingly complement each other on the field and aren't built around just one player. now is the time to be able to see if it works. And it's, we're not going to learn a ton, but at the same time, I think it's beneficial to hear Kyle Whittingham say that after 20 years, this feels like one of the more upbeat springs for him. That kind of shows the intensity that is being brought into it, the level of interest that he has for it. And I think that those are all important things. Obviously, the success has to show up on the field, but I think the good vibes are definitely better than the bad vibes that Utah's had the last little bit.
And look, it's only March, excuse me, so it's tough to know exactly what the Big 12 is going to look like coming up this fall. And Kansas State is the Vegas favorite as of now, but Utah is right there with K-State. The way too early over-under, 9.5 wins for Utah. But again, way too early, okay? So it doesn't feel like as of now the program is burdened with the weight of heavy expectations, where last year was like, all right, year one, Big 12, Vegas, national pundits. We're telling everybody in the conference, like, hey, one of your new teams is going to win your conference. Go to the CFP, and that team was the University of Utah. And I think at every stop, Coach Witt, Coach Ludd, Morgan, all of them had to kind of answer to those expectations. And it doesn't feel like those expectations are as heavy this time around. Do you think that kind of lifts some of the pressure, and how can that benefit the program moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think that gives them less of a burden coming into this, especially knowing that they have to replace, about 50% of the roster. You're not doing that while still having the burden that you're going to be picked number one in the conference. This is the year where, a lot of the Big 12 people, they're looking at Utah like, look, you made all this, noise and everything about being this top team and come in here and you did nothing. Utah's absolutely going to be forgotten, right? Like, they're going to come in here and they're going to probably be picked anywhere between third to sixth or something in the conference. And nobody's really going to give them the time of the day. And that's exactly where Kyle Whittingham likes to work. Now, I would still argue that Utah needs to get into that point where they need to embrace that number one spot and they need to continue to kind of show out that way. Unfortunately, circumstances haven't helped them, but I think this is a great area for Utah to work. They can just go out there. They can go have that fun. They can do what they need to get the attention. There's still going to be expectations placed on Utah, obviously. Like, there was a tweet that Utah had where they showcased a video of the coaches talking to the players on the first day of camp, and they're talking about getting into the semifinals in the playoffs. Now, I don't know what full context that is or anything that way, but you're not talking about that if you don't truly believe it, right? Like, Kyle Whittingham's not coming out there with his roster and trying to preach those things if he doesn't believe that he's got a talented roster. So there's going to be expectations, but it's probably going to be more internal, less public. Unless somebody like you or me decides to come out there and try to put those expectations on them, I think this is going to be a season where they absolutely can work kind of underneath the radar and kind of catch people by surprise. So really fascinated by that dynamic for them this year. It's been effective for Kyle Whittingham every single year that's the case. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case this year as well.
Does it feel like the quarterback spot for the first time in a long time is solidified with Devin as one and Isaac as two from your vantage point?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a real benefit there. I don't know if this is Isaac taking a step up and really owning up to kind of his problems that he had in the fall, and he's really embraced this and he's doing well in spring. But he obviously got a mention from Kyle Whittingham, and that doesn't go lightly. But I have to imagine that they still want to kind of keep him in the background. You hope that Devin Dampier is your guy. Maybe there's other guys that you can bring in there and allow them to work before you get into Isaac. But I think this is a much I hate to say it because last year it's like, oh, it's the deepest quarterback room and all this other stuff. But I think they've done well to at least recruit to the depth. You've got guys like a Nate Johnson who comes back who can play at quarterback, but he's going to be a multi-talented player that's going to come in there and just be more than a quarterback or a backup role or whatever that may be. And so I think there's a lot that Utah can do with this. And as long as Devin Dampier is the guy, they're going to be perfectly fine. Obviously, if you have to go into the other depth, then we'll see how that shakes out. But I think, knock on wood, just simply for my own sake, just not having to deal with a million quarterbacks again, this appears to be a good situation for Utah.
So I've got your Twitter pulled up, and since you and I last spoke, and it looks like this just came down over the weekend. I know it's the 2027 class, but it looks like Utah has locked in a quarterback named Thaddeus Thatcher from Vegas. Tell us about this recruit that Utah was able to dial in.
Yeah, this is the younger brother of Christian Thatcher, who is a new recruit or new player to Utah, freshman linebacker. But he, in his sophomore season, got a lot of publicity. There was a lot of talk about kind of who Thaddeus could be. Look, there's still 2 more years until he graduates, and a lot of things that he can do and mature. And I think those last 2 years, especially for a quarterback, kind of show what you can be. But I think the fact that Utah's been able to really hone in on that so early and be able to look a class out, that really benefits them in the future, right? And as long as things go well for Utah and Christian Thatcher, who by all means is fully committed to Utah, you've developed now a great pipeline for Utah to be able to continue moving forward. And especially if Thaddeus continues to improve in his ability on the field, you're already getting a 4-star guy as a sophomore. Can that mean he gets up into a higher ranks later? We'll see. But I think that gives Utah a lot of flexibility to work with. He's a kid that's shown a ton of potential. It's hard to fully know everything in terms of the high school ranks and how it will compare to, the collegiate ranks. But the fact that he was able to come so early really bodes well for Utah in their recruiting class, kind of setting up the next year, kind of stacking classes, so to speak, as you're moving forward.
All right, Josh, before I say you lose, the Utah women for the 4th straight year advanced to the NCAA tournament. They're ousted in the first round, which means they could avoid their second round, like South Carolina, Don Staley. And we had Gavin Peterson on the show last week, and he handled it really well about wanting the opportunity to see how they stack up. But obviously, Coach Rob bounces, Coach Pete takes over, and for the 4th straight year, they go dancing, but they're out in the first round. I feel like Gianna's probably played her way into potentially leaving for the WNBA after a great year, but they've got a lot potentially coming back depending on some decisions that certain players have to make. So what do you make of the Utah women's program under Gavin year 1, and what do you think we'll see next year?
Yeah, I think it was still a success under Gavin, right? Like, I don't think this is some knock on him that he couldn't get his team further than the first round. The fact that they were even able to get there based on everything and keep things together shows kind of the talent level and his coaching chops. I still think it's a difficult thing to be able to have to lose a coach midway through the season. And yeah, it was only 4 games in, but that's still a tough challenge. And, it's hard for him to get into it fully as his own staff. But I think they did well, right? Like, and I think it's unfortunate because the group of seniors that were involved with the program, they absolutely turned the program around, right? Like, this is a school that was doing okay in women's basketball, but in the Pac-12 era really hadn't kind of taken off. There was a year that Lynn Roberts had only won 6 games. She retooled her entire thing and tried to get it back. And this group of seniors absolutely changed that for him. So, it's unfortunate they weren't able to do more than that. Obviously had the Sweet 16 run a couple years ago and was able to compete with LSU, who ended up being the eventual champions. But I think there's a lot of promise for this team. The incoming class is really stacked. They've done really well in their recruiting. They've gotten a lot of interest, and none of that's changed with Gavin. If Gianna decides to come back, which probably a good probability she does since she wasn't able to go deep into the tournament and build her stock anymore, that gives you at least another proven weapon, somebody that can take over the game while still acclimating some of these new freshmen. But I don't think there's anything lost from this team. I think it's just going to be a different era now that you don't have the same faces out there for the last 4 years.
All right, buddy. Appreciate the time. Enjoy the sunshine and have a good week, and we'll chat soon.
Sounds grand.
All right, Josh Furlong covers the University of Utah for KSL. Always appreciate his time. You can get him on social media. At JFurKSL is where you find him. All right, we're going to do a little BYU hoops coming up, maybe a little spring ball. Spencer Litton stops by, friend of the show. But Josh Furlong joined us today, courtesy of our friends at Advanced Window Products. Our guy, Nate Orchard, the mayor of Sac Lake City, still holds the record for single-season sacks. You guys have heard me talk about Advanced Window Products before. We've been out at their place for several remotes. It's Nate, it's Jake Weber. It's a family-owned business that have been around for nearly 40 years, and they're committed to taking care of our community, a local Utah company. So here's the deal. If you need windows now, or if you anticipate needing windows, maybe you're going to sell or buy a home in the summertime when it's time to transfer schools or whatever, you should get a hold of Advanced Window Products today, because if you need it now or later, you can lock in a savings excuse me, of $2,500 off. When you purchase 10 windows or more, all you have to do is call and get on the schedule. And even if you don't need windows for a few months, if you call today, you'll lock in the savings. Okay, so they've got a bunch of different warranties that are transferable to new homeowners, lifetime warranties, okay? From the factory to your front doors in 8 weeks or less, you can save on your energy bill with rebates available through Enbridge Energy. They've got great financing options, so if you're thinking, wait, it's not in our budget, well, don't jump to that conclusion because with their financing options, you can save now and pay later with payments as low as $150 a month. So here's how you get a hold of them. Give them a call at 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100. 801-850-9100. Or visit them online at advancedwindows.com. 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. Spencer Linton joins us coming up next on a beautiful Monday afternoon, so keep it right here. On ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, we are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. friends from about 35 miles down south typically stop by. We like to play an a cappella version of the Cougar fight song, Rise and Shout.
That we do.
But our guy Spencer lit in front of the show, good dude. Last time we let him pick, he picked Rage Against the Machine.
Right.
And I said to you, like, vibes are high for BYU. Let's let him pick today. Is that an a cappella song he picked?
I don't think it's an a cappella song. There's a little bit of that like in the background, like it's the intro, but something to do with what's going on now.
Let's let Spencer Litton himself explain his bump choice, his song choice on a Monday. What do we got, pal? What was that?
This is a movement led by BYU sharpshooter Trevin Nell and the old school boombox BYU men's basketball has in their locker room right now. Above the head, they are jamming out to that specific song. I don't understand it, but apparently the team is behind it, Spence, and that's what they're going with through March.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. And look, man, you've got to be impressed. And we'll get to the topics in a vacuum in a moment. But let's just pan back and talk macro takeaways. Like year one, Kevin Young, obviously you win the press conference. And his NBA pedigree is something that is undeniable. Then you hear the figure that they're paying him and the NIL he has at his disposal. And all of that was in line. But what you did not have, Spencer, was proof of concept, and you start conference slowly. You lose to a Utah team where you're 10 times more talented than they are. But then something clicked, and there were some roster adjustments. There were some rotation adjustments. And at this point, and we will get to where they are now, it is a team where every player knows exactly what they're asked to do, and they're executing at a high level. But year one so far, Kevin Young, what's your takeaway?
Yeah, to your point, just first and foremost, he has done an incredible job at getting players to buy into their very specific roles. And it took a while, and there were some hard conversations. But everybody, it seems, has bought in on this. And that is not easy to do as a first-year head coach, to get guys that have been around the program, especially veterans that have been around for multiple years, to adjust to something that maybe they feel like they have earned and they're being relegated. But it's been masterful for him to get them to buy in, and then it's easy to enjoy the ride when you're winning, and it all kind of becomes together, this cohesive movement that they're experiencing right now. But yes, Kevin Young has done an incredible job at getting guys to buy in, and he hasn't done it with a used car salesman approach, saying the right things. He just is who he is on the surface, and there's a genuine nature about him. And maybe there have been some hard and abrasive conversations, but it's never done with a demeaning tone or nature. He just is who he is, and that's why NBA guys love him so much. Is they all say, well, he'll just tell you how it is. And we don't have time to waste. We don't want to be, having smoke blown up your you-know-what. We want to just know where we stand with the coach, and that's what Kevin Young does. Every BYU fan, as we zoom out, wanted three things when Kevin Young took over. One, they wanted to get some NBA talent and an NBA draft pick at some point back in the building. Okay, check. Two, they wanted BYU to make the NCAA tournament in year one. Check. And then I think the icing on the cake was, okay, if we can have this third box of winning a game in the round of 64 for the first time in 14 years, then it will be a massive success, and then it's been worth all of this NIL effort and the increased financial figures and all of the hoopla that went into it. It'll be worth it if we can just check those three boxes. Well, they've done that, and then they got to the Sweet 16, and they've won 11 of 12, and they finished tied for third in the Big 12. It's just the vibes are immaculate. It's really, really fun, and it has BYU fans thinking that this is maybe just the beginning. I'm pumping the brakes on it. I'm like, okay, look, I know that it's been incredible, but give them a little bit more time. BYU is a team that has a lot of veterans, but, needless to say, it has been a remarkable first year for Kevin Young, getting to the point where he is. BYU's on a gravy train. They're floating down the river on a gravy train, playing with a ton of house money right now.
I know you guys talk about this on your program, but I don't think it's talked enough, outside of your ecosystem, where I'm watching Kentucky, Illinois over the weekend and watching Mark's team play. And they show Jackson Robinson, who unfortunately is hurt. He's not playing right now. And then the Colin Chandler kid comes in, and Colin's really good. It's going to take him some time to get his sea legs back after the mission. and he was just okay against Illinois, but he was a BYU commit that followed Mark to Lexington. And, Mark wanted Richie, he wanted Dallin, and both those two hit the transfer portal. And honestly, I thought they were going to follow Mark to Lexington because Kentucky is a blue blood in a way that BYU just isn't, and honestly never will be. That's just who Kentucky is, not who BYU is not per se. But illuminate us a little bit on the process that was able to get Richie, the Big 12 most improved player of the year, and Dallin, who I think is an underrated element here because oftentimes Yegor has struggled against pressure and Dallin's just a gritty, tough kid. But getting those two back, how did that go down and what has that meant to this team?
Yeah, let's start with Dallin Hall because I think the conversations with Kevin Young, as far as I understand it, were more intricate and detailed early on in the re-recruiting process than they were with Richie. Richie has a spiritual element to his re-recruitment, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But as far as Dallin goes, yeah, there's interest from a number of programs, notably Creighton, Spence. I mean, Creighton was all in on bringing Dallin Hall over and having him join Stephen Ashworth and the Blue Jays, and they were offering a pretty significant number, from what I'm told, in NIL to try and coax Dallin over. And this is where I think Kevin Young and his genuine nature and his very clear vision and picture of what he wanted Dallin to be and do and how he could help Dallin develop into a professional point guard. Not saying that Dallin's going to be an NBA player, but Kevin Young believed and said, if you want to play professional basketball and your dream is the NBA, then I believe that 100% you should be with me because I can turn you into a point guard that has elements of play similar to a very, very smart, heady, and situationally aware Chris Paul. Not saying Dallin is Chris Paul, but you're starting to see elements in Dallin's game of things that Chris Paul would do. And we all know that Kevin Young is very close with Chris and worked very closely in his time as the Phoenix Suns with one of the greatest point guards in the history of the game. And so it's just fun to watch like Dallin develop that way. And so Dallin bought hard into that in his development as a player to come back and work with Kevin so that he can pursue some level of professional career after this. And it hasn't produced eye-popping scoring numbers, but what you're seeing from Dallin is over the course of this wild run is an incredible ability to distribute the ball in tight spaces in the paint. He makes Fouche Traore way better, and he opens up a ton of his three-point shooters. A lot of the plays that he makes, like NBA point guards, go unnoticed. He just seems to make everybody better. And so Dallin bought hard into that, and late in the season, starting to pay off. So that's the Dallin situation. Is the NBA professional or just the general professional development was a big selling point in coming back to work with Kevin Young. As far as Richie goes, Richie will tell you. I mean, he was on vacation with his wife in South America or Central America and was in a taxi. And just after he had visited Kentucky and Mark and Leanne Pope, he said he felt just like this little feeling in his heart that, okay, I think I need to go back to BYU. And he immediately told his wife. He looked over at her in the taxi and said, I'm feeling like I just need to go back to BYU. And she said, it's funny you say that because I'm feeling the same thing. Like we feel like Kevin Young is the guy for you. This program, you committed to them. You always wanted to be at BYU. You were a little kid that went to games with your grandpa, and you'd cry when BYU lost a game. Richie, you are BYU. And so that played a large role in it. And then Kevin once again sold him on, I think I can make you an NBA player. Like you have a skill set that is underrated and underappreciated. We can show the country what you are. And so you ask Kevin Young about player development and getting ready for the NBA with a guy like Richie Saunders, and he could spend all day talking to you about all the different things and nuanced elements that have gone into that training and that individual work. But it began with, and I know that not everybody is big on this whole spiritual premonition thing, but for Richie, he will tell you it started with that thought and that strong feeling while he was sitting in a taxi on vacation in Central America that he needed to come back to BYU, and it was the right place, and it would work out. And wow, has it ever worked out for Richie?
Hey, man, we're all just trying to get through the day. You get right with your maker, whatever that sounds like for you. And, if that's how Richie was able to find his way back, it's worked because let me follow up. I didn't think this last year. I think he gets an NBA shot. I mean, the first time I saw him play live, my first thought, Spencer, was like, wait, he's legitimately 6'5". And he has elevation on his jump shot. He can catch and shoot. His release is a lot quicker. The other thing is, I don't know what he takes before the game, but he does not slow down. I mean, he plays like he's crushing Red Bull at every time out. Like, the effort level's there. The size is there. The shot has really elevated. Like, I didn't think this last year. I think he gets an NBA look.
Absolutely. And how about the floater that he has developed on that short corner baseline move? And his first step is much quicker. His ability to finish around the rim. I mean, he reminds me a little bit, and maybe this is pushing the limit in a way, but I get Alex Caruso vibes from a guy like Richie Saunders. I know he's not a point guard, but like the athleticism, his ability to elevate and finish around the rim and get out and just beat guys off the dribble, and the motor, my gosh. I mean, it's wild that he maintains that type of energy. And I've asked him about it several times, like, where does that come from? Where is the engine generated from at that level? And he attributes it to his upbringing, his family, working on a farm, getting up super early every day, being really methodical and working, doing manual labor with his hands. He said he just developed a work ethic very, very young, and that has carried all the way through to where he is now. I mean, good grief, earlier this season, this is not a joke. BYU lost a tough game at home. I think it was to Texas Tech early in Big 12 play, and I was speaking with Richie's dad, and he's like, I just need to get Richie out of the gym for a second. I said, we just need to reset. And so we're going to get out. We're just going to go do some service. We're going to go help some people, and we're going to build a gutter and prevent some flooding from around this house, this area. And I was like, wait, you're serious? You're going to build a gutter on his day off, and that's going to help him reset? That's exactly what they did. Not a joke. That's the type of kid and family that he comes from. We're going to go do service to try and get right mentally after a tough loss like this, just to get him away for a second to get his mind right, and then he'll be back to playing basketball. That's the type of person we're talking about with Richie Saunders, but this work ethic, this energy, and this motor, it comes from a lifelong approach and very, very early implementation into manual labor, how to do hard work, how to get up early, and just be so calculated in his approach.
Yeah, 23, the age will hinder him a little bit in the draft process, but I think he gets a look, probably as an undrafted free agent. And, I didn't think Sam Merrill would be the pro that he's turned into. And, if Richie can keep elevating and evolving with his just ability to extend the three and knock it down, maybe he's a 10-year NBA vet. But, Yegor, is he 18 still? Is Yegor still 18, Spencer?
He just turned 19.
Just turned 19. Okay. And prior to the last, I think 11-1 the last 12 for BYU. Prior to this run, part of me is like, dude, just come back for one more year, play under Kevin. And now it's kind of like, yeah, you get it. Because if you're an NBA scout, you look at him at 19 and you say, we might not be drafting him for year one, maybe not even year two, but the measurables, the straight feel for the game, the ability to pass and see over the defense. And he started to knock down that three in a way that he wasn't prior to kind of this last run. So is the feeling down there that he has just kind of showcased his talent to the level that he has gone after this year?
I would say he's very, very down the middle in his approach. Like when some people say, well, I'll address it after the season, like you're like, okay, but you're really thinking about it. We all know you're kind of thinking about it. I believe Richie when he says, you know what, I'm taking it one day at a time, and I'm going to address that after the season. So I believe there's actually a pretty good chance that he comes back. And the X factor there is, not surprisingly, he's going to be thrown a huge NIL deal that will persuade him to come back to BYU for one more year. What I did learn from multiple NBA scouts and talking about Richie is they feel like the age factor is already there. The impression I got was, well, he's already 23. It's not going to be that big of a difference if he's 23 or 24. It really isn't. Like, he's already considered an older player, so we don't believe, and it shouldn't impact his draft stock that much because he's already elevated into that level. Like, he's already considered like an older guy. So 23, 24, whatever. It's not going to hurt him that much if he decides to come back to BYU. NIL here could offer him a very, very lucrative reason to stay back, guaranteed money, play another year under Kevin Young, play with A.J. DeBonsa in an even a more accelerated and brighter spotlight than he already is playing with, and a chance to potentially do something really, really special. Not that this Sweet 16 run hasn't been special, because for BYU fans, it's been magical. I mean, think about it. This is the first time BYU's been in the Sweet 16 when they haven't had the National Player of the Year. It took Danny Ainge and Jimmer Fredette to get him to the Sweet 16. Now it's guys like Richie Saunders, Dallin Hall, Trevin Nell, Bruce Traore, like these long tenured veterans that have all bought in. Richie's obviously elevated his game, but I think that he's going to, and he's worthy of it, he's going to pull in a big NIL price tag and consider coming back to BYU for one more year, and then go to what I believe is going to be a successful professional career. I believe he will be on an NBA roster. Like, he just brings too much. You cannot coach what he has in terms of energy and just raw athleticism and the development. So I'm with you. I think he could have a nice career as a guy coming off the bench in the NBA who's always going to give you effort and an ability to play defense and finish around the rim. And his three-point shot, yeah, my gosh, like it's been otherworldly at times this year. So all, tip of the cap to the Tater Tot King, Spence. Like, he's taught to trot, if you will. He is playing some really, really high-level basketball.
It is such a perfect BYU story that Richie's grandfather invented the tater tot. It's just like, that's central casting, my guy. It's perfect.
It really is. What's been funny is to watch how the nation has just, like, caught fire with it. Like, I thought it was really cool at first, but then to see this the wave of momentum, you got Charles Barkley and Jay Wright and Seth Davis all eating tater tots during the post-game wrap-up show and talking about Richie Saunders and the AI images that are coming out, with different tater tot elements surrounding Richie have just been wildly entertaining. But it's, great time. They're just enjoying the ride, and this team believes that they can absolutely hang with and maybe shock Alabama. 4.5-point underdog from what I saw early today. The over-under is wild, 175 points, but this is a team that believes that they aren't done yet, legitimately. Like, they think that they can score with any team and outscore even Alabama, who is the team that plays with more pace in college basketball than any other team and comes in with one of the most prolific offenses in the entire country, led by Mark Sears and Grant Nelson.
Yeah, and we'll get to Bam in a moment, but before we do, you referenced BYU fans, and, it just kind of cracks me up, because after the Kansas-Arizona back-to-back, when they won McHale, my tried and true BYU Blue family, my siblings who all went there, my dopey brother-in-law who still wears that Helaman Hall T-shirt with his freaking dorm room on it, and he's older than I am. I sent him all a text. I'm like, you guys need to start watching because they're good, and they have a chance to advance to the NCAA tournament and win a few games. And the skepticism abound, and the PTSD about all of these teams since Jimmer that have had an opportunity to do something special but fallen short, including last year's team. I felt like, from my ecosystem, my friends and family that are BYU fans just wanted to see them win a game in the tournament. And I'm the one, like, driving the bandwagon. I'm like, no, they can do more than just one game. So what did just simply getting the monkey off their backs round one against a good, well-coached VCU team, what did that do, kind of not just for the team, but to kind of calm the fears of this fan base that has been excited so many times in the past, but only to be let down?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? You're right. PTSD is the perfect explanation for it because of how many disappointments. And obviously what happened against Duquesne last year was that was brutal, because that was like, okay, this is a prime matchup for BYU. Like, they're going to get to the second round, and then it didn't happen again. So there was certainly some carryover from that. But BYU as a team in the locker room, they believed they showed up against VCU, and they were incredibly confident. I mean, they just really liked the matchup, especially in Denver. And Kevin Young and his staff told me before the game, like, and some of it was off the record, we can talk about it now because it's already happened, but they felt like they were going to wear VCU down, and that those guys would be sucking air at the end of the game, and BYU would win, they felt, comfortably. Well, guess what they did? VCU tried to pressure them, get up in their faces and started with the aggressive defense to try and throw BYU off because they're trying to emulate what Houston and Iowa State do. And sure enough, they just started to get gassed, and BYU does what they do, really efficient offense. Just a brilliant scheme and game plan led by Kevin Young's mind, and they just dominated. They overwhelmed VCU, and they told me that's what they were going to do. And then after the game in the locker room, it was like, okay, well, we expected to do that, so let's just do it again. Like let's just keep it rolling. So there was this air of like, we expected to be here. Like they were certainly happy, but they weren't celebrating the first round win like all BYU fans were, which were like, oh my gosh, they finally won a game. It's a miracle. They did it. It wasn't like that. It was, well, told you, we wanted to do three things. We wanted to keep VCU off the free throw line. Did it. Wanted to take care of the ball. Did it. And we wanted to wear them down and make them tired. Did that too. Like, it was crazy. VCU made 15 3-pointers. It didn't matter because the game plan was set in place and there was just a belief. So they were very confident, unlike BYU fans who were just happy to win a game. But I'm glad you're driving the train, man, because I think it's beyond most BYU fans' wildest that the Cougars would get to the Sweet 16 in year one under Kevin Young, but here they are. They did it. They never trailed at any point in the game against Wisconsin. They were dealing with a relatively unfriendly whistle, had the weird flagrant 2 rule that was implemented, and by rule it was a flagrant 2. I think it's dumb, but it was. They overcame a lot, and here we are in the Sweet 16. So I'm glad you're driving it, man, to try and coax some of these BYU fans into believing that this team is legit.
Well, credit where credit is due. And I noticed early, and I know it sounds cliche, but Kevin is running an NBA offensive system, and the system is essentially allowing these players to play freely and showcasing who they are individually in a team concept, and everybody gets it. I mean, the final defensive play where the Tanya kid, who's really good, I mean, he nearly went for 40. And the Moet Mag kid, I mean, it was perfect verticality. There was no panic. They didn't run 2 at him, which I thought they would because the Tanya kid was going. And, you know, Trevin Nell, who I think at times, just like Yegor, struggles with athleticism and pressure, he's just kind of settled into this role where he knows how to get his looks. And when he's open, it's pretty much lights out. Like, everybody gets it. I do want to ask you about one more individual player, then we'll get to Bam and I'll set you loose. And I know Ute fans aren't going to like this, but whether it's Houston or Bama, when the other team has superior strength, speed, athleticism, Caba's got to be who Caba is because he is the elite athlete on that roster. And, you know, credit the kid for going to knock down a couple of free throws, and Wisconsin clearly tried to foul him. But what has he meant to this BYU team? And he is going to have to be, I think, even better against a Bama team that has elite speed and athleticism.
Yes, and Bama gets after it on the glass, too. Holy cow. I was just talking with St. Mary's play-by-play a couple of minutes ago, and he's like, they were better on the glass than I thought they would be. They really just dominated our pretty big team, and Caba is at the center of that. The words that the coaches use when explaining how Caba plays the game are they say often he plays with so much force and, yes, athleticism. And he is the rim protector. He's the rim roller. He understands what his job is, and that is to just intimidate and, for lack of a better phrase, flex on some of these stars that he's matched up against. Like, that dude understands his role, and he is at the heart of BYU's defensive pressure and force. If Caba plays with force at the rim, defensively specifically, it sets a tone for the game and for BYU, knowing that, hey, if I get beat, he's back there and he can help me clean up some things. And he's going to rebound the ball like an absolute monster. So, and he has seemed to elevate his game even against Houston, right? As bad as BYU played against Houston, Caba was this bright light. And he was trying to will BYU back into the game in some capacity in the second half when he's blocking back-to-back shots and he's yelling at the crowd and he got BYU to within 13. And the only little bit of momentum BYU had in that game against Houston in the Big 12 tournament was because Caba was matching the athleticism and physicality and force that Houston was bringing to BYU. The key for the Cougars now is when that happens again, and it's not going to be from Alabama. Alabama's not a team that gets after you defensively. They don't create very many turnovers. They just worry about pace and just scoring a ton of points, and they're really freaking good at it. But if Kaba can intimidate them a little bit and just make them question things, like maybe I don't want to go to the rim right now. Maybe I'll just kick it out here or swing it around. He's that type of guy that can change it, and what a pickup he's been. But he is the quote-unquote rim protector and the force of the BYU defense. If BYU is going to beat Alabama, I'm with you. That dude has to bring it like he has done so many times recently in wins against Iowa State, and the effort of the chase down block and his physicality against Arizona and Wisconsin. Like, the guy's going to have to play just like that and make Alabama hesitate just a little bit about wanting to go in the paint and trying to overwhelm him, because he's not a guy that is easily overwhelmed.
So we'll end with a couple of more thoughts. Let's expand the conversation on Bama, because when BYU has struggled, and look, like, I've watched Houston so many times this year, and oftentimes I feel bad for the other team. So I'm not going to knock on BYU for not being able to hang with Houston. Like, when Utah went there, at one point they had 3 buckets and like 8 turnovers. Like, that's a different level team. And Houston, Alabama is not Houston. In a way, they play a little bit like Wisconsin. Wisconsin has more of an up-to-date offensive attack than I think most college basketball fans just assume, because so long Wisconsin basketball was known as like a Hoosier type 4 pass before you take a shot thing. But Bama is like Wisconsin on steroids. Now, what they don't do really well is guard. Okay. And so that's why the spread opened up at 5.5, and then it moved towards BYU twice. And I get it. I'm not going to make this pick today, but I will pick this game prior to Thursday. So let's get into it. What do you think BYU has to do to, for the first time in program history, advance to the Elite Eight?
Yeah, I mentioned one of them. They have to limit Alabama on the offensive glass. Alabama just gets after it super hard on the offensive glass, and they score a lot of points with putbacks and those dagger threes. Like, when you get an offensive rebound and you kick it back out for an open three against that arsenal of shooters that Alabama has, and they knock down threes, like, those are just devastating to any team. And I know BYU can withstand punches, and they often punch back, but if they can limit those type of buckets, and Houston does that to teams too. Houston did it to BYU in a big way, where they just dominated the offensive glass, chance after chance after chance, and then they score and they just beat you down mentally because, like, gosh, we got 2 stops there, but they got a third try, and then they hit a 3. If they can limit those second chance opportunities, that is where I would start with how BYU hangs with and beats Alabama. And again, Kaba Keita comes into play there. That's where it's going to really help BYU. And then, of course, you got to make shots, and there will be ample opportunities against this Alabama defense. Once again, they don't force a lot of turnovers. They're kind of like Wisconsin. They don't really get after you super physically. They just want to run you to death. And BYU has shown that they're a team that will run with the best of them. So if they can limit second chance points and then just maintain to a certain level. I'm not asking BYU to shoot the clip that they did against Wisconsin, but if they can just hit their averages over what they've done in the last 12 games, then they're going to be in a great position to make this game weird late and put the pressure on the 2 seed and just continue to play with that house money confidence that, hey, let's go do it again. Let's get to the Elite Eight. So starts with trusting the habits that they've built. Kevin Young says you can't fake it this time of year. BYU is very, very established in what they do. Trust their system on offense, rebound the crap out of the ball, and hopefully Mawit Mag and Trey Stewart can slow down Mark Sears. I'm not sure who BYU is going to put on Grant Nelson. Maybe it's Mag at times, and they put Stewart on Sears. I don't know. But Kevin Young, has he not been so good in his just rotations and, like, especially in late game scenarios, his timeouts, when they're called, how they're called, creating situations for his best players to get the ball with limited time on the shot clock? Man, it has been, to your phrase, an NBA approach, and it's been, in many ways, it's been masterful.
All right, buddy, before I set you loose, as part of the prep, when there's a big BYU story, I watch my guys on BYU Sports Nation in the morning before rolling in to do the show. and I fully anticipated your boy was going to be feeling himself today. But if after a Sweet 16 appearance we get a gold chain untucked and a T and he's quoting TLC in your opening segment, I shudder. I shudder at the thought of what I'm going to see if I turn on my guys at BYU Sports Nation and you're to the Elite Eight. I'm thinking like full diamond ice chain the gold chain untucked in the TLC wrapping today. That's next level feeling yourself, man.
He might be shirtless with the diamond chain.
All right. All right, man. Well, look, it's a good team. It's been a fun run. Happy for everybody down there, and hopefully they keep it going. Thanks for the time, my guy.
You got it, brother. Always good to talk to you, man.
All right, Spencer Linton, BYU TV. Yeah, Jerem Jordan today, gold chain untucked, quoting TLC. Like, I know you're feeling yourself.
I'm on board.
Well, first of all, you don't play for the team. All right, let's start there. You're not with the team like you're supposed to be a media member. If our guy's going with gold chain untucked, laying down TLC lyrics for a Sweet 16 matchup, I'm thinking big old ice chain, maybe to Spencer's point, no shirt on if they go to the Elite Eight.
Yeah, he's feeling himself.
Oh,
but
he
hey,
is. He sure is.
Do your thing. We're in the business of content creation and sports. Have fun with it.
Yes, indeed. It is the toy aisle of life, which we very much enjoy. All right. Shout out to our guy, Spencer Linton, BYU TV, BYU Sports Nation, brought to you today by IFA Country Stores. Any drive to the basket begins with the first step on the court. That's the ultimate power move. IFA's Step 1 crabgrass preventer and lawn food is the first choice to give your yard the healthy kick. Green look you desire. The neighbors are going to be green with envy. Shop IFA online at ifa.coop or stop by one of their 18 Utah locations today. The weather is beautiful. It's time now to actually think about your lawn care. I think we've made it past the cold and spring is here. So consider our friends at IFA Country Stores. Shop IFA online at ifa.coop or stop by one of their 18 Utah locations today. 4 o'clock hour, Jeff Johnson, former Ute, Sarah Todd, Lil Jazz. So we got a lot to do on this beautiful, beautiful Monday afternoon. Don't go anywhere. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. Jeff Johnson's going to roll by today. Ute, great, one of the best high school basketball players that I've ever seen, quite frankly, not just here. He was a walking bucket. Britton's older brother, better looking, smarter, knows more about basketball than Britt. Maybe we can get Jeff Johnson to beef with Josh Grant as well. We get like the Johnson brothers versus Josh Grant.
Maybe we can find a different beef. Get really, reaching our tentacles out there.
Jeff is a very nice guy, and Britton's a very nice guy as well. Jeff is not as front-facing.
He has a filter, I think.
Yes, well said.
There's a thing there.
Jeff's a little more measured than Britt, and that's one of the reasons I love doing radio with Britton, because you never know where we're going to go.
Yeah.
So if you missed it, Josh Grant hopped on the show, and he was the first person to say, publicly that this job should go to Alex Jensen. Britton Johnson hopped on the next week, and then Josh came back on the show and went back at Britt. So is there enough, at some point we're going to try to get those two in studio together, correct?
That's my goal. I would like that. I think they both were seemingly up for it if we can make it happen.
And obviously, it's not an issue that's real. Let's see. Up to date ESPN 700 bracket standings for our ESPN 700 crew. I fell over the weekend because I did the weird thing of picking upsets, which did not happen. How many of your do you have all four of your Final Four teams left?
All four of the Final Four. I think only Iowa State is the only team in my Elite Eight that has been eliminated. So, if Auburn wins the entire thing, I think I'm going to be sitting pretty good in multiple brackets.
You picked Auburn to win the national championship.
Yeah.
Oh.
I was going back and forth with them in Houston, and I don't know how confident I am, but that ended up being my pick.
Let's see. Of my Elite Eight teams left, I have Michigan. I need Michigan to beat Auburn. Sorry, if Michigan beats Auburn, I'm in a good spot. I've got Michigan State. I've got Florida and Texas Tech. I have Houston and Tennessee. And then I have Duke. I have 7 of my Elite Eight teams left. I actually picked St. Mary's to upset. I needed Colorado State to win, which they almost did. Needed St. Mary's to win. So pick some upsets that didn't work out. But ultimately, we'll see what happens the rest of the way. So, of course, the BYU storyline, advancing to the Sweet 16 for the first time since Jimmer Fredette was making a rain down in Provo, is the big story, of course, here locally with the attention they've received year one under Kevin Young. And with Alex Jensen in the fold now, as Utah men's basketball, his 17th head coach in Utah men's basketball history, I know that some Ute fans are uncomfortable with the parallel drawing, okay, BYU hired an ex-pro guy, and look at what they're doing. It's the same thing that happens and permeates throughout the ecosystem of sports at every level. When something is successful and it works, you're going to do what you can to get some of that for yourself. We still have to wait to hear what Alex's staff is ultimately going to settle into, and there's a lot of hires to be made. I was referencing this earlier with Josh Furlong, who stopped by to start the show today. It covers Utah athletics for KSL. I think Rick Majerus had 2 assistants, Coach Judd, and then Dick Hunsaker. Maybe he had a couple of other grad assistants or whatever. And for years for the Jazz, it was Jerry Sloan, Phil Johnson, Gordy Chiesa, and one trainer. And now you look at the sidelines of all these coaching staffs. There are 5 coaches on the front row, 5 coaches on the back row. So in order for this staff to fill out, there are a number of hires that still have not been made, that still need to be made. And it's going to take a little time. I think Josh made some good points about kind of playing the long game with some of this stuff. The rumors about Andre Miller continue to be out there. I cannot speak to that as to whether or not we're close to the process. It does continue to be a little bit of an awkward topic to dig into because Utah men's basketball technically still playing. The college basketball crown, where the Utes find themselves, it is kind of the 4th tier, I guess is how I would say that, postseason tournament to qualify for. Utah will play Butler coming up on March the 31st in Vegas. That's a 1 p.m. tip time. There's a chance that we will be in Las Vegas for this tournament. And so from the landscape of wanting to be fair to Josh Eilert and this program, it's just odd that the main topic is the new head coach and what the new staff is going to look like. If you missed Alex's comments during the announcement, during the press conference when he was announced as the head coach, it's worth going back and listening to. And he referenced that he has spoken with some of the players that are on the roster now. As of now, unless I missed something, is what I should say. I believe the players in the transfer portal officially. Jake Wallin, who is a sophomore, I think a lot of people would like to see Jake back with the Utes. He's officially in the transfer portal. Hunter Erickson, who has one more year of eligibility left after his stops at BYU and then Slick, and then, of course, the U. He has 1 year left as a grad transfer. And then Lawson Lovering, kind of same situation. 1 year left for Lawson to play college basketball. And Lawson, because of his size and his skill set, might have a chance to cut a paycheck playing ball overseas. I don't think he's an NBA guy. Those are the players in the transfer portal as of now for the Utes. And we'll see what the re-recruitment process looks like if AJ wants any of those players back. And, I was discussing this earlier. I think one of the more underrated or under-talked about parts of this BYU basketball team, and it struck me as I was watching Kentucky play Illinois over the weekend, and the Colin Chandler kid, Davis County boy, shout out Davis County, really, really good prospect. It's going to take him a minute, and they talked about this on the broadcast, coming back from that 2-year mission. Colin is still kind of early in the process, but he was a BYU commit who decommitted after Mark Pope left for Kentucky and then followed Mark to Lexington. And he had a couple of injury issues earlier this year. Jackson Robinson is hurt right now. I think it's a thumb issue, but Jackson was playing really well for Kentucky. And, of course, Jackson was the only BYU player who had a good game in the NCAA tournament last year against Duquesne when they lost. Jackson's a good player. And so those two bounced from Provo to Lexington to follow Mark. But Mark Pope, according to my understanding of the whole thing, badly wanted Richie Saunders and Dallin Hall to follow him to Lexington to play for Kentucky. And look, it's not a knock on BYU to say they're not the blue blood that Kentucky is, and that will never change because Kentucky is on the short list of the bluest of blue bloods in all of college basketball. So the fact that Richie Saunders and Dallin Hall, who didn't just say no to Kentucky, but I guess some other schools, according to our guest earlier, Spencer Litton, had a chance to go down to Creighton. Those are two linchpins, two of probably the 5 or 6 most important players on this team. Without those two coming back, this team looks a lot different. So you got to credit Kevin Young for kind of the re-recruiting process there that allowed BYU to hold on to Richie Saunders, who I think is their best player. He's not their best pro prospect, but he's their most important player, in my opinion. And during the moments where Yegor Demon has simply been overwhelmed by pressure, athleticism, and strength from an opposing team that decides to bring tremendous pressure to BYU, Dallin Hall has been a major piece for Kevin to go to when Yegor has looked a little bit overwhelmed. I mean, Yegor is still young. This is his first year of major college basketball, Big 12 physical conference. And Dallin has Big 12 experience, and he's tougher. I don't know how else to say it. He's just tougher than Yegor Demon is. Without those two, without Kevin Young re-recruiting those two players, BYU looks different this year. I don't think there's any doubt. All right, we'll do some Ute basketball. Jeff Johnson's going to roll by. We also have Sarah Todd on the program today, who covers the Utah Jazz for the Deseret News. Then we'll launch into 5 o'clock hour of the program today on this beautiful Monday. But before we catch a break, woke up refreshed today, feeling good after a good night's sleep last night. And our next guest can tell you why. My buddy Doug from Farmer and Chemist on a beautiful Monday. Doug, happy first, it feels like the first day of spring. Happy Monday. How we doing?
It does. It's nice out there, brother. Glad you got a good night's sleep.
Well,
it makes me happy.
Well, it's because of you guys. I remember when I met with you, I said, look, my deal is sleep at times can get problematic, and I've tried a bunch of sleep meds over the years, and if they knock you out, you feel like crap the next day, and if you don't fall asleep right away, then you want to try something else. This is the first product that has been able to allow me to sleep for an entire night. How can you help people sleep at Farmer and Chemist?
Yeah, so the way that we help sleep is with a combination of 3 different cannabinoids, CBD, CBN, and THC. That's a lot to keep track of. So just come into our store and we'll help you get the right gummy. But essentially what we're saying is we can help you just like your experience. Anybody that's suffering from a poor night's sleep, whether it's you wake up a lot or you wake up and you're thinking about the next day and can't get back to sleep, or even having trouble falling asleep, we can help with our yummy gummies. yummy gummies you just take about 35, 40 minutes before you want to take your brush before you brush your teeth and say goodnight, and you'll fall asleep beautifully, sleep all night. And if you do wake up, you'll be able to function just fine. And then when the alarm goes off, you're ready to go, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and happy for the day to begin. No hangover, no side effects, no grogginess, and ready to go.
We got to move over here, Doug, because while I'm not an old man, I'm not nearly as young as I used to be, celebrating a birthday last week. And I've just realized that part of aging is and if you want to stay active, if you want to exercise, if you want to lift weights, if you want to do yoga, if you want to play a little golf, if you want to hike, you're going to deal with pain. You just are. And I keep a little container of your problem solved in my golf bags. It was spelled SALVED. And when the shoulder or the hip or the back locks up, I just, basically rub some on. And it's a pretty instantaneous fix. So for our listeners that are in constant physical pain, how can some of your products over at Farmer and Chemist help them?
Yeah, that's a great example. And I love that you keep that in your golf bag. There are a lot of folks that do the exact same thing. And it works just like you described. So Problem Salved is an ointment that you can rub into any painful spots, whether it's an achy joint or a sore muscle, and you just want to relieve that tension. Just rub it in within 5 or 10 minutes. The pain is gone. And it's not magic. It's not weird science. It's not voodoo. It's simple chemistry saying that we're going to go in and resolve the inflammation before it gets out of hand. And if you already have inflammation, then it'll just pull it back so you get almost immediate relief. Like you said, 5-10 minutes, and the pain is gone when you rub in Problem Salved. And it's a combination of the same thing, 3 different cannabinoids that work in unison together to provide pain relief that is natural. It doesn't have any side effects like upset stomach or bleeding ulcers or anything else like you can get with ibuprofen after long-term use. And you can just apply it topically, or we have the same combination that you can take in a gummy.
All right, Doug, before I set you loose, I know there are probably plenty of our listeners that have heard about CBD products and maybe have a lot of questions. So how can they get educated on exactly what this stuff is, what it means, and what's the process that you'll kind of take them through? Then tell us about the special offer you have for our listeners who give you a call.
Yeah, so we're super excited about the offer that we have, and you can come into our store at 7719 South Main Street in Midvale, or online at farmerandchemist.com, or you can check out our podcast, which is You, Me, and CBD, available on all platforms to learn more about CBD and how it works. But for ESPN listeners, if you come into the store or use the promo code on farmerandchemist.com website, then you get 20% off your entire order.
Doug, thank you, my friend. Have a great week, and we'll chat soon.
Thank you. Take care.
All right, we got 2 hours down. We got 2 hours to go on this Monday afternoon. Coming up next, we'll get the take of a Ute legend on the new Utah basketball coach. Jeff Johnson will join the program. Then it's time for a little Sarasota action. We'll move into the 5 o'clock hour of the program after that. Right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, we are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. 1 week ago today, Alex Jensen officially introduced as the 17th head coach in Utah men's basketball history, a hire that seems to be consistently applauded across the board in whatever ecosystem you exist in, whether you cover the team like we do here on the station, whether you're with the administration or the current athletic department, or whether you played for the team like our next guest did. One of the best high school players I've ever seen play, went on to play for Rick Majerus at the University of Utah. You know his little brother, Britton Johnson, as a good friend of the program. Well, Jeff is a good friend of the program, too. Jeff Johnson on a Monday afternoon. Jeff, how we doing, buddy?
Spence, good. How are you, man?
I'm good. I appreciate the time. So I've just got to know, since I haven't been able to kick the tires with you, what was let's start with your reaction when you heard that Craig had been let go. What was the kind of the first thing that came to your mind?
I think I kind of knew it was going to happen. I think I was a little surprised, as most people were, that it happened when it did. But it kind of makes sense now. And I kind of knew going into this season that Craig had to have a pretty good season or a pretty good run to probably come back next year. So ultimately not super surprised.
How quickly did the name Alex Jensen enter your mind?
I mean, it was in my mind ever since last time when they didn't hire him. I think hiring a college coach that had some success at another program makes sense, and that's usually the norm. But I think just seeing what some of these other schools have done, getting someone like Alex just made sense for our university. And we took obviously some steps back from 4 years ago too, from that hire. So this time we had to get it right. And obviously on paper and through the enthusiasm, it looks like it's a really good hire, and hopefully that will come to fruition, which I think it will.
It's wild, Jeff. Next year, and I'm a little bit younger than you are. I'm between you and Britt, I think, thereabouts. But I was in school when Rick was the coach, and you guys were making the tournaments, and you were making long runs. And so for me to say into a microphone, next year will mark 10 years since the last NCAA tournament appearance for Utah men's basketball, blows my mind. Blows my mind. When I say that, what's your reaction?
It's hard to hear. It really is. I mean, it blows my mind too. And we now have a generation of kids who just have never known Utah as a postseason team, a team that's made a run. I talk to kids who are in their teens, and they're just like, yeah, I can't ever imagine Utah playing in an NCAA tournament. And it's hard for them to fathom that we were regular visitors to that tournament every year, and that we won a lot of games there. So when you say that, it is hard to hear. And especially, I was talking yesterday with my son. We were watching Colorado State and New Mexico play. And I was telling how those were teams we used to compete against and pretty much would beat them all the time. I mean, we'd have, every now and then you'd have like a Wyoming have a good run or a UNLV. But I played San Diego State before they got good, and with the Kauai teams and all that. And same with Colorado State and same with New Mexico. And it's just to see them playing in the tournament and winning games like we used to is hard.
Alex won Mr. Basketball at Viewmont in '94. And then I think you're the only player in Utah. No, Tyler did it. That's right. Tyler Haws, Lone Peak. But prior to Tyler, you were the only player in the history of the state to win Mr. Basketball in '95, '96. Did you play against Alex in high school? I can't remember.
No, I didn't play Alex. I mean, I would have played him had we played their team when I was a sophomore and he was a senior, but we never really crossed paths. He was at Viewmont, I was at Murray. We just never played them. But I knew of him. I remember watching him when I was a sophomore and they were in the state championship. And I remember going up and watching his team and thinking they had some dudes back then. I don't know if you were there yet. In Bountiful, but they had some guys, and Alex was kind of the same type of player he was in college and high school. Like, you just watched him and you're like, this guy does everything.
No, I was not there yet. Bountiful, 1997. Historians claim it's the best high school basketball team in the history of the state. That's not my claim. I would never make that claim, but historians claim that. And I'm proud to say, Jeff, we beat Viewmont both times we played them because they were our rival back in '97.
There you go. Well, those historians obviously never saw the '96 Murray Spartans, so I'm not really sure what you're talking about. But
obviously, I kid.
No, I hear you.
But you played with Alex in college, and so let's start there because you hear a lot about the fact that Rick seemed to. Alex was kind of the exception to the Rick Majerus ire at times. Alex and Andre, according to what I've been told by guys who were there. So what was your experience like playing with Alex? What sort of player was he, and what sort of relationship did he have with Rick?
Well, everything you've heard is true about him and Rick. I mean, it was an interesting relationship because you just saw my freshman year, even these guys like Keith Van Horn, who Coach, loved Keith and respected him, but he didn't adore him like he did Alex. Like Alex was just his guy. It was his type of player, Just Alex is way more talented than Coach Majerus ever was, let's be honest. But at the same time, Coach Majerus, if he had talent, he would want to play the way Alex did. Because he's never going to be able to play like Andre did, or he's never going to be able to play like Doliak or Britton or any of those guys. And so he just loved Al. And I played with Al for 1 year when he was a senior. And it was an interesting year because I was coming off my mission, and Coach had hyped me up to all the guys. That's what Coach would do. When he's not there, he hypes you up. When he's there, he kills you. And he was hyping me up coming off my mission. And then as soon as I got into the first workouts and stuff and I was going against Alex, it all came back down to earth. But watching him talk about Alex and tell Alex, he actually had to get on him about being more selfish that year because that was the first year we didn't have Andre, Doliak, any of those guys. So it was kind of Alex Jensen's team, and he needed Alex to be more selfish, which is hard for Al because Al didn't play that way, but he needed him to be more of a scorer. And so it was fun in practice competing with him because we played the same position really. And at some point during the season, Coach, which was a good compliment for me, was he said, I got to keep both you guys on the court at the same time. So he started playing Alex at the four, at the power forward. And to watch Alex be that versatile, that's what shows me his mind's ready for coaching. Because when you have to play the four in our system, you have to know all the stuff the 4 and the 5 do that are interchangeable. But then he was also playing the 3, which means you have to know all the stuff the 2 and the 3 do because they're interchangeable. And Alex it just seemed like he never missed a beat. So it was impressive.
So you kind of alluded to some of the elements of potentially your answer to my next question, but I want you to kind of expand a little bit because it feels like the guests I've had on the show or things I've read about Al over the years is everyone who played with him felt like if he wanted to, at some point he was going to be a really, really good coach. And he played in the pros for about 7 years and played overseas and then landed with Rick in St. Louis. What about your experience with Al as his teammate and everything else you know about him indicated to you that if he wanted to, he's going to be a really, really good coach?
It kind of surprised me at first when Alex became a coach because when he went overseas and played, I know Alex, he's kind of like Coach Majerus where it's hard to coach certain type of players and things that are out of your control because it's like that stuff Josh always talks about how Coach Josh Grant will say how he kind of ruins the game for you because you see it at the purest level. And I thought Alex might have a hard time with that. But then in watching him in the NBA where they don't play pure at all, they take tons of bad shots and take nights off and don't always play hard. To watch him adjust to that and to see what he did as an assistant, I mean, I kind of thought if Alex was ever going to be a coach, he'd be good. But I didn't see it right away that he would do it. And then once he got into it, just all the stuff you read about player development, player relationships, it's all been pretty positive that I've heard.
Yeah, and he obviously has had a very interesting journey that's landed him back home at the University of Utah. Jeff, you referenced the last time around. When I asked you when Al's name kind of came in your head, you said, well, the last time around. The last time around, of course, Mark Harlan decided to move on from Larry Kraskowiak and then landed on Craig Smith. Do you have any insight? Because I've heard rumors and I've got some knowledge of exactly how that went down and whether or not there were extensive conversations with with AJ the first time around. But any insight as to, why they didn't go harder at Alex, or maybe they did and he wasn't looking to make that jump from the NBA, last time around? Any insight there?
Yeah, I mean, there's some stuff that I've privy to that I've heard Alex tell me that, I probably, wouldn't share all of it, but I think what I would share that I think what he was clear on was the interest was mutual, but I don't think he was wowed by what they came and did. I don't think Mark Harlan was sold on Alex yet. And so I don't think the presentation was like super impressive. And I mean, some of that's just speculation. Some of that stuff I've heard from other people, but it just kind of seemed like they did their due diligence talking to Alex, but they didn't come to Alex with the red carpet, probably like they did this second time around. And timing wise, I think you look at all the stuff going on with the Dallas Mavericks right now, it probably just set up better for Alex to make the move now.
See, Porter, I told you Jeff is the Johnson with the filter. There's more that Jeff knows. But if we had Britton on the show and Britton had the knowledge, we'd have all of it, because Jeff has the filter that Britton does not.
It's a perfect balance.
Yeah, there we go. What happened to your little brother? How did he avoid this intelligent approach that you have, Jeff?
Spence, I mean, every time he was on with you, I just would hear every HR violation being committed and journalism 101 just thrown out the door. And I felt bad for you. You knew what it was like for me being his older brother and having to kind of babysit him all the time. But I'll even tell you on air, Spence. I'll tell you off the air more, but I can't tell you on the air. There you go.
No, fair enough. No, fair enough. I don't want you to divulge any secrets that your guys tell you. I want you to maintain those relationships. But while we're in the space, you referenced, Josh Grant coming on the show the day Craig was fired, and he said this job needs to go to Alex Jensen. And there's been a lot of conversation about how this staff will fill out. And before I get to the hire that Al has made so far, that a lot of people are excited about, to the extent that you're comfortable, Jeff, share with us any inside information you have on the potential of an Andre Miller joining Al on the bench. And, from my vantage point as a proud Gen Xer, a Utah basketball fan from the 90s, if you walk into a gym with Andre Miller, you've got instant credibility that's hard to find anywhere else. So any insight as to whether or not Andre could be on the way, and any other names out there you're hearing that might join Al's staff?
That's such a good question, because I know everybody wants to know. And I talked with Alex after his press conference introductory the other night, and we didn't get really far into it because, as you can imagine, he was pretty much bombarded by everybody. And I think at some point, I'm sure we'll discuss if Andre's an option for him or not. I think right now he's doing his due diligence and trying to get guys that can hit the pavement right now, recruiting and doing all the general manager work. And I mean, that first hire he made, the guy that's been at Washington, looks like that's kind of fits that process. Andre obviously sounds like a really good fit, but it doesn't mean it's a great fit for Alex. And I don't know that it is or not. I'm not really, I haven't had that conversation with him yet, but I think a lot of times we as fans want nostalgic reasons. We want, Andre's a perfect fit, or this guy's a perfect fit. But Alex has developed his own coaching style, his own connections in the NBA and in the G League, that he may have 5 or 6 guys already on his mind that are not even on our radar, like this first hire. I don't know that he was on at least any of our radar, like former players, but none of us, that wouldn't have been a guy that we were like throwing out there, but it sounds like a good one. So I don't really know about Andre yet.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Jeff, because I've been talking about this quite a bit. And as you outlined, and I've talked about a little bit throughout the course of the past couple of weeks after the news became official, there is this thought among some in the community that you just need former Utes on the bench start to finish. But let me ask you this: as there are very few players like you and your brother, really elite in-state players that went on to play at the University of Utah that have the insight as to what it's like to be a local kid. And, some of Britton's recruiting stories are wild. And I always tease him, like, you needed me in your life when you were deciding where you wanted to play basketball, because Jim Boeheim, Syracuse, and But ultimately, you guys are both local players that played for the local team. Do you think you need a flavor on the staff for assistant coaches or staffers that do understand the local landscape and what it's like to recruit kids like you and your brother?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you look at every staff. I mean, they have guys that understand the local players, and you even can throw in like the religion side of it with LDS players, because you're still going to recruit kids from Utah that are LDS. And I mean, they have 2 kids on missions right now that are scholarship guys. And so you need a Jeff Judkins type. You need somebody that can go into people's houses here. And Alex can do it too, because Alex is both of those. But I think you still need an assistant who can fit that mold of, like, I know the talent here, and I know this kid wants to go on a mission potentially. How's that going to work with our scholarships? How's that going to work with NIL? You have to look ahead 2 years, 3 years. You know, it's something BYU's dealt with forever. And Utah was pretty good during the Majerus days because of Judkins. He was able to kind of figure that out. So I do think that's important.
You know, it's interesting, and I know that some Ute fans don't love this, but look, if something works, it doesn't matter what level or what sport, you're going to look at that model and say, what can we learn from what they're doing at a place that's similar to ours, even though the BYU-Utah dichotomy and juxtaposition is different in a lot of ways. But you look at the way Kevin Young has filled out his staff. He's got Will Voigt, who's a G League guy, Brandon Dunson. Burge obviously has experience down at Brigham Young, as he does at Utah. But really the only other BYU guy that they have on their entire staff is Charles Abuo. I mean, these are ex-NBA players. These are ex-NBA staffers, all the way down to his strength and conditioning coach and his nutritionist. So do you think as we move forward, Alex will kind of do the same thing Kevin has done based off of Al's basically 2 decades of experience in pro coaching to tap into his community and his network to kind of fill this staff with NBA type-minded, pro type-minded people?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because that's kind of what I keep getting asked by everybody. And I think that's on the mind of everyone. And I think you hit the nail on the head. He's going to have to go get guys that can help him restore the program and win right away. And it doesn't matter if it's former Utah guys, and it just matters that it's the right guys. And that could include a mixture of both. I think that would help fans with attendance. But ultimately, Alex can't really worry about that. He's got to really follow what Kevin Young did and get an NBA guy, a G League guy, or 2 of them, and then get a local college guy or just another former assistant on a staff somewhere that knows the college game. And, you know, everybody wants the former Utes to come in to bring the band back. And if it works, great. But if they're not the right guys, Alex is smart enough to know, like, it's his butt on the line. He's got to make it work. And if it's just him hiring guys that fans feel, you know, nostalgic for, then that's not the right way to go about it. And so I think Alex is smart enough. He's already doing that. I know that. So
wanted to go back to something you referenced earlier, and Al talked about this. I've heard Britt say this too, and of course Josh Grant on the radio show. When you hear former Rick Majerus players say he ruined the game for us, and Jeff, I don't mean the mean things he said to people. Okay, we could get into that. But from a basketball X's and O's standpoint, what does that mean? How did playing for Rick change the way that you view, watch, and in your own experience, coach basketball?
Yeah, I mean, he didn't ruin it for me as much as he ruined it for Josh, as you can tell on the radio. I feel like I have to come up and clean up after Josh and Britton on your show.
Yes, you do.
You know, Josh is a good friend, and he's right in a lot of ways. The thing about when you played for Coach, everyone knows how hard he was on his players. At the purest level, you learned basketball from him because he knew that he wasn't recruiting players that he's not recruiting the players the Blue Bloods are recruiting. Even, let's be honest, Andre Miller, right, wasn't recruited like that. Bogut, you know, those kind of guys weren't necessarily all recruited that way. So they had to come in, they had to learn how to play the right way, buy in, and then if you got the right team that was talented enough, you had the right coach who could prepare you the purest way, the most detailed way. So when you see, I think what Josh likes to talk about is when you see basketball and you see some fundamentals lacking in teams, the way they're coming off screens or the way they don't rotate on defense, it's things that you could have never got away with coach, or you would have never been on the court in the first place. And so then when you're coaching, the thing that those kind of guys have a hard time doing is adapting when they're coaching kids now. And I've had to really learn how to adapt because I coach, high school kids and on AAU teams with my son. And you do have to, you can still keep your core principles, but you do have to adapt. You can't yank kids out for every mistake they make and chew them out, And so that's kind of what I think they're talking about.
So when it comes to the process, Jeff, of building a winning roster, Al talked about this during his presser, talked about playing with toughness and a group that the fan base can be proud of. But what does the model look like? And certainly the model has changed because, and I know people don't love the whole hey, in the 90s, Rick did this, but you go find a Van Horn out of state, you go find a Doliak or an Andre out of state or a Hano overseas, and then you supplement them with really good players like you and Britt or Drew or whatever. Locally, I don't know if that's the model that still works. I hate to just look at BYU's roster, but right now that's the team that's still playing, and that's the team that has the juice. So what sort of mixture of out-of-state kids, in-state kids? How, I guess it's a long, clunky way of me asking you, how does Al go about this? What's the process look like?
I think it's what you just said. I mean, and I don't think there's anything wrong looking at like BYU's doing it right now. I mean, they obviously have excitement, they have NIL money, but they're tapping into their resources. That Igor Denham kid, I mean, he came from Russia because of Travis Hansen, right? Travis had a connection with his dad. So they tapped into that. And that's what Alex has to do is Alex has to get guys around him. Like you bring in a good assistant coach and a guy will follow. Kevin Cada followed Chris Burgess. He had a relationship with Chris Burgess at Utah. So you got to get these guys that are out of state, out of country, whatever, and then blend them in with the local kids, because you got to blend them with local kids for the fans and also just to play the right way that Alex wants. And you really said it. That is the formula. I don't know that you're going to go get 7 transfer portal kids from back east and wherever, and then come in and expect them to stay more than a year or two. So, I think you still have to build, you have to get those 3 or 4 guys that will stay probably all 4 years, and they're solid players, and then you get in those 2-year guys or those transfer portal guys that are talented. And then if they can all buy into Alex's system, he'll be a good enough coach and have a good enough culture that I think we'll get back there.
Since you are in the ecosystem of coaching AAU and you see some of these top shelf high school players, I don't cover high school basketball. I don't cover high school football. I just don't have time. There's too much stuff to do day to day with all the pro sports and college sports we have here. But I hear a lot of people that are around the high school game here in the state talk about how much the talent has improved. Can you speak to that at all? Whether or not, because back in the day, I mean, look, I don't mean to keep saying this, but you and your brother were kind of unicorns. There weren't a lot of Jeff and Britton Johnsons in the state of Utah. And throughout the course of our state's history, there aren't a lot of kids that played high school ball here that have gone on to play in the pros. I mean, that's a short list. From your vantage point, Jeff, is the talent in the high school and the AAU ranks in the state of Utah a lot better than it once was?
Man, that's a good question. Here's what I'll say. So I am very involved with the top kids in the state because I'm involved in that Utah Prospects program. I coach the 16s, and there's kids on my team who are starting to get offers and getting looks, and a lot of the 17s are. What I'll say is the thing that's changed everything is that those prep schools. Because back in the day, that would have been where Britton and I would have been recruited to go play on one of those. And those are the kids, local public school wise, you kind of look at those kids almost differently because they're playing on a Tuesday night and a Friday night. You can go see them play, and they're local. Those prep school kids are playing out of state all the time. That's where AJ Devance is playing. There's 2 or 3 other kids on that team who are from Utah or have moved to Utah that are highly recruited. So those kids are kind of a little different. The other kids, like the public school kids, yeah, the talent's still there. I mean, there's no like probably the top end isn't like what you were just saying, like those top kids, like a 6'10" kid like Bryn getting recruited by everybody, but there's still like probably more depth, I'd say, more guys that will get offers to some of the smaller schools from top to bottom than you would have seen before. So, I mean, the state of Utah does have a lot of talent right now, and everybody can shoot. That's the thing, is everyone can shoot the ball, and that's such a premium right now in college that all the kids getting looked at can shoot, you know. And in our day, it was more like they were recruiting you if you were an athlete that could play, and then if you could shoot or not, they didn't care. They'd figure that out.
The Stephen Curry effect, Jeff. I mean, everybody wants to shoot it, not just shoot it, but shoot it from 35 feet. You know, he really changed the game. Hey, before I set you loose, last question. What was your understanding, and reveal what you feel comfortable and keep what you want to yourself, but what was the main difference this time around as Mark Harlan landed on Alex Jensen this time in a way that he didn't prior to?
I think it just came down to timing and pressure. I think he felt it. Mark felt it from the people who are writing the checks and the people who are donating and just the fan base and himself. I think he probably did a lot more due diligence and realized he's got to get this hire right. And then timing for Alex. I mean, a couple weeks before Alex took the job, if you could have seen a text thread between me and him and Britton, I would have never thought he was going to take the job just because of where he was at. My son is actually on his mission. My older son is on his mission in Dallas right now, and he just moved into like Alex's area. So Alex and I were talking about Alex because Alex wanted to have him to dinner, and he was just telling me how much he loves Dallas and how much he loves being with the Mavericks. I mean, this was just like 2 weeks before he took the job, and his kids were happy, his wife's happy. He really likes Dallas. But I think this one was too hard for him to turn down. I'm sure financially it was too hard to turn down. I'm sure timing, it was too hard to be a head coach of your alma mater. And I think Mark realized from just things I've heard, he had to put the full court press on Alex this time in like he didn't the time before.
All right, my guy. Well, always a pleasure. And it's good when I have a Johnson on that did not start a fire as a result of his inability to control himself. So I think we survived. Appreciate the time. Be good. Reach out if you need, okay?
Thanks, Spence. I'm glad I can come on and, like, again, clean up after Britain.
That's
so anytime you need me to.
Exactly what happened, Jeff. And I imagine that's a cross you've worn your entire life, yes?
Yeah. A lot. Don't forget your shoes when we're halfway to the school, you know, your basketball shoes. And let's go back and get them now. Stuff like that.
Oh, goodness. Thanks, man. Be good, okay?
Okay, you too. See ya.
Jeff Johnson, one of the best high school players I ever saw. Dude could just get buckets. He was a walking bucket, had a good career at Utah. I don't think he was used correctly. That's my opinion, but I would side on the err on the side of what Rick Majerus thinks, not some middling sports talk radio host. Jeff stops by today, courtesy of our good friends at Burt Brothers. With over 30 years of experience in nearly 30 locations, Burt Brothers ASE certified technicians bring expertise and professionalism to every interaction. Industry-leading warranties and low-price tire guarantees. It's a one-stop shop for reliable repairs and maintenance, from tires and alignments to fluids and brakes, offering a full range of automotive services tailored to meet your needs. Now offering value tire options, such as Americas and Summit tires, starting at just $69 with warranties to go up to 70,000 miles. As one of the few AAA certified shops in Utah, Burt Brothers upholds the highest standards in automotive service. Stop by Burt Brothers or Tire Busters locations or schedule an appointment today to experience the trusted service that has made them a Utah favorite for over 3 decades. Burt Brothers, doing it better since day one. More information online at burtbrothers.com. Coming up on the other side, our good friend Sarah Todd covers the Jazz for the D News. She'll roll by the program. Busy Monday show on a beautiful Monday afternoon. Hope you had a great weekend, and keep it right here on ESPN 700. So I've got a list up. It's made me curious after talking to Jeff Johnson last segment of the best high school basketball players from the state of Utah historically and how many of them went to the NBA. It is a short list. So we were talking about the dynamic of how Alex Jensen goes about the process of building this roster for the University of Utah. We'll get to this in a little bit, but let's welcome in our friend Sarah Todd from the Deseret News, the two-time Utah Sports Writer of the Year on a Monday. Sarah, happy Monday. How are you?
I'm good. The Jazz didn't have practice today, and so I've just been really lazy and continue to count down the hours and days until this season is over.
Oh, man. I tell you what, I always feel, you feel for a lot of people during a rebuild. You feel for the fans. You feel for a lot of the team employees. I feel really bad for Will Hardy, who I think is a great coach, and I really hope before his contract is up, we get to see him coach a team with decent NBA players. But it's got to be wearing on the beat, right? Like you, Andy, TJ, whoever else is on the beat, I always lose track. But what's it like for somebody you cover the Warriors? I mean, you're a beat writer for a rebuilding team. What's that like?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm experiencing the same fatigue that the fans are. I think I do feel bad for the players because, I feel like they have to be feeling what I'm feeling at such an exponential level, but also are constantly being asked by the coaching staff and their competitive souls to still care every day. And I'm sometimes, I go into the arena to this last stretch of the season and I'm like, ugh, they're not going to try. Why do I need to try? I feel like throwing in the towel, but and there are a lot of times where I'm writing stories and I'm like, God, can I really write 5 more stories about how Isaiah Collier passes the ball but can't shoot? Is that really what I'm writing today? So, yeah, it's just sometimes feels like going through the motions, but I try to give myself a pep talk on game days.
Yeah, and look, ultimately our jobs rule, so we will not complain, and I don't mean that we are, but I was down at my brother's house for dinner last week, and he said, how many Jazz games have you been to this year? And I said, I think I've been to 5 or 6, and the Celtics were going to roll into town. This is before Boston came into town, and he said, well, are you going to go see the Celtics? And I said, you know what, no. And I can get to the arena in less than 10 minutes with no traffic. I have a media credential. I could get a free meal. And it's just hard to, and it's not part of my job, so I don't need to be there anymore. I mean, for 7 years I did pre-F and post, so I was there for every game. And I'm sure part of me not going as much is for 100 nights a year, I left that arena after midnight, and I'm just not into it anymore. But it is tough to certainly if it's not part of your job, even if you can go for free, it's tough to motivate yourself to go when there's just not a lot of seriousness on the other side about winning.
Yeah, I think, and like you said, I'm never gonna complain about the job, right? I get paid to watch basketball, so I know that my life is good. So that is not what I'm saying at all. But it's my job to write about it, and so we've got 10, 11 games left this season, and at this point, I don't think that there's any juice that I'm going to squeeze out of this team that the fans don't know about, the watchers don't know about. I don't think that there's anything that I'm going to illuminate that people don't know, because truly the story right now is what lottery pick are the Jazz going to get? And so I think that everyone, fans, me including, we're I'm counting down the days so I can get to the Combine in Chicago and go to the lottery drawing night.
When is that, by the way? Is that the first week of May?
I think it's May 12th is lottery night. Okay. So, and then the Combine follows that.
So I do have to say thank you, and you probably don't know why, but when you or Andy or whoever writes a really compelling piece, it gives me topics and content on the show. Because if we're honest, to your earlier point, hey, Kyle Filipowski is kind of like Kelly Olynyk. Hey, Isaiah Collier can pass but not shoot. How many times can we regurgitate the same old stuff and try to make it interesting for listeners? And we have a very smart basketball fan base. Jazz fans are smart. We've had high-level basketball in this market for 40-plus years. You can't fool them. But when you wrote the piece on, I guess I'll just kind of reduce it down to, hey, this has been a teardown, and the rebuild starts right now. I want to be clear. I am not knocking on you at all. I'm just knocking on that premise that, of course, is coming from the front office. I think it's a little bit silly, but I've been able to ask, like, all my NBA guests directly crediting your piece about this whole idea that, hey, guess what, fans? We have not been rebuilding. We have been tearing down, and we're actually starting to rebuild now. It's revisionist history. I don't buy it at all, but kind of take us into the background of this information and explain kind of this idea to a lot of fans who read your piece.
Yeah, I think, the point of the piece was like of being honest with the fans about like what could be coming up over the next couple of years, and like kind of letting people know that, pie in the sky, like what if the Jazz get Cooper Flag and everything feels like puppies and rainbows in June? Does that mean that the Jazz are about to be good? Like, no, that's actually like one of the first big pieces of the rebuild. Like the Jazz have to this point not gotten acquired, created any of like the really big foundational pieces of what like the next era of Jazz basketball is going to be. And so like that's what they're still searching for. Lauri Markkanen looks like a great piece to have and like could be a core piece of a team moving forward, but like we don't even know if he's going to be a core piece of the team moving forward. We don't know what his future is going to hold. Walker Kessler looks like a very good young player. We also don't know if that's going to be here in 3-5 years. Like we just don't know at this point. And until the Jazz get someone where it's very clear, like this is the franchise player, this is the player that we're going to build everything around, then there is nothing to build, right? And so that's kind of the impetus on writing the story. And yeah, like getting to that, talking to executives around the league, talking to executives within the Jazz, talking to coaching staff, talking to players, like it doesn't feel like any of them feel like they're on necessarily the rise right now, but that they're getting ready to be on the rise. And so that's kind of the lens through all of it is like, yeah, they've been working towards what could happen this summer and then even next summer during two of like the most highly touted drafts of the last few years. And that's where they're hoping to find foundational pieces that can really take the Jazz into the next era.
Okay. So this just reeks of a, hey, we didn't do this the right way, because when you move on from your two stars and your coach walks away and your general manager walks away, call me old-fashioned, Sarah, that indicates you're starting a rebuild. And yes, a rebuild begins after you tear it down, but there's nothing more indicative of a, hey, we're tearing this down than moving on from two all-stars that are in their prime and having your coach walk away and having your general manager walk away. Doesn't that indicate that, yes, okay, we've started this process and now we've got to build it back up? I mean, that's my takeaway.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, the sort of reporter 101 version of the article that like we're talking about from this, right? That's just like, hey, these are the facts. This is how the teardown happened. And this is how fans can expect for the rebuild to go for the next few years. Now, the Sarah Todd column version of that is like, yeah, they messed up. They didn't get rid of Mike Conley fast enough. They had Kelly Olynyk on the team with Lauri Markkanen and Walker Kessler, and that looked too good for too long. They should have been selling off parts faster than that. It's not like they didn't know that Mike Conley was good at basketball. Like, it could have been worse sooner for the better, right? Like, not tanking to the absolute bottom to try during a Victor Wembanyama year was probably a failure. And so, like, yeah, the column and Sarah Todd opinion version of that is like the teardown took too long. And instead of trying to have one of the foundational pieces now and tanking really hard over the last 3 years rather than just the last year, would have looked really good in terms of kind of the in-house assets you could have gotten through the draft. And that's just not where we are, and it's not what happened.
Let me kick the tires with you on this, because to your point about some of the good players, like Lauri All-Star 2 years ago, I always remind people he played the first portion of that season with Mike. He had grown-ups with him, and that's why he looked the way he looked then. juxtaposed to the way he looks now. He's playing with kids. He's playing with children. It's completely understandable that Lowry has not been the same player he was 2 years ago, and I don't think any of it's his fault. But over the course of their semi-competitive Conley, Olynyk, as you outlined, some good NBA vets, I heard rumors. We all heard the Drew Holiday rumor. I mean, hell, Bobby Marks came on this radio show and said the Jazz had a deal in place for Drew Holiday that Portland liked. Drew just wanted to play in Boston, which you understand because now he's an NBA champion. It might be again this year. I know that Ryan Smith has spoken publicly about the fact that he thought they had a deal for Kristaps Porzingis from Dallas. There are other rumors that throughout the course of when they were just kind of semi-competitive, they were making inroads to expedite this growth with some very good players. Any insight as to whether or not they were close at all with any of those deals?
I mean, close is that's an interesting word, an operative word, right? Sure, I think there were deals on the table that the Jazz could have said yes or no to, and then some of those deals they said no to them because they didn't like the offer that was on the table. And so, I think that they were close, and that if the Jazz or the other teams involved would have said yes, that something would have happened. But that can be a little bit revisionist history too, and then we could go down the road of would Drew Holiday have actually been good for this team? I think that part of the problem is when we're looking at what all of possibilities and what could have been. The Jazz had put feelers out trying to go after Mikal Bridges. The Jazz had put feelers out about Drew Holiday, about Paul George, about a number of players. And I don't think that if you survey the landscape of the NBA right now, if any of those players had actually come to Utah, that it would have fixed anything or even given the Jazz a team that could be competitive in the West. And so their failures on that are actually probably good for the longevity and future of the team. That being said, trying to make those deals and thinking that they could help is also probably a failure.
Yep. Yeah, well said. And I referenced earlier about, feeling bad for team employees, feeling bad for fans, feeling bad for beat writers, and then feeling bad for Will Hardy. And you recently wrote a piece on Will choosing the Jazz as a result of Danny Ainge and his track record. And as I've said before, Danny doesn't need me to stand up for him. You can go look at his track record. When you look at Danny Ainge and his resume in pro basketball, it's a really short list. It's guys like Pat Riley and it's guys like Jerry West who have been great players and they've coached and they've been in front offices. He even did a little media and he was really good at it. And I often just wonder aloud where Will's head is at here. He has 2 years left on his deal. It's a very rare thing for a head coach to have two separate options picked up, and that's where we're at because they obviously think very highly of him. But I do wonder if this plan does not come to fruition and the luck is not on the Jazz side, and we're sitting here in March of 2027, and the Jazz are once again spinning their wheels with no real positive, tangible direction forward, what that means for this head coach that could go get another job tomorrow. So illuminate us a little bit on this process and what Will said to you about why he chose Utah, and do you think he's long for this job, even if in 2 years they're not giving him the horses? He enters gyms most night just behind the eight ball.
Yeah, when Will Hardy took this job, he knew what the assignment was. It wasn't going to be a secret. I think at that point, they hadn't traded Donovan Mitchell yet when he took the job. But he knew that was a possibility, a probability, and that he was probably going to be a coach of a team that was going to be going on a rebuild. And so it's not like I've used this comparison before. When Steven Silas took the job for the Houston Rockets, that was a James Harden team with some incoming young players that looked like they were going to be fresh and ready to help. And within a few weeks, Harden is forcing his way out, not showing up to training camp, and then you have a ton of young guys that have no direction. That is not the job that Steven Silas signed up for. And so that's kind of the opposite end of the spectrum here. We're Will Hardy knew that this is what was going to happen. And so I think that that's not to say that he is not fatigued, that he is not hoping to see a light at the end of the tunnel, right? But looking at a job where it's probably going to rebuild, it's probably going to take a lot of time, and there's going to be a lot of hard nights and struggles and fatigue. I think that Will was ready for that and knew it, and also looked across the table and was like, understood the vision that Ryan, Danny, Justin Zanuck all had, and trusted that they were going to be able to pull it off. And so then what we have to wonder is then at what point does he continue believing that they can pull it off, or does he lose faith that they can pull it off? And so I think that that's what we're talking about kind of in the 2 to 3 year stretch from now. And you're right. Will Hardy is well respected. He's well regarded across the league, especially by a lot of the younger coaches in the league who are successful, and they look at Will and they think that he is one of the brightest coaches in the league. And so he could get a coach tomorrow, or could get a coaching job somewhere else tomorrow. And you're right about that. And I think that that's one of the big questions going forward is how long is Will Hardy going to be able to stick with it? And I think that because he signed up for it, that there's probably a longer holding pattern there that he can hang on to. But it is something to pay attention to.
So let's operate off a fun hypothetical. Let's say Sarah Todd is at the draft lottery on May 12th, and for the first time, Lady Luck shines on the Jazz, and they grab number 1. And Cooper Flagg suddenly is a Jazz man. And I keep saying to the listeners, if you have not watched Cooper Flagg, you should, because he's very good, and he's very exciting. He pops right off the screen, and he will be good right away, even for a player that should be a senior in high school. He turned 18 in December. It's wild, okay? So if that happens, Sarah, as you outlined in your piece, a couple of directions. Direction 1 is Marketing, Kessler, Cooper Flagg, your front court. All right, we got something here. And, depending on what they do around them, that's a team that probably is not bottom 3 or bottom 5 next year. But it doesn't mean they're top 3 or 5 either. They're probably in the middle. So the other option is to say, all right, the rebuild starts now with his 18-year-old, and this is our timeline starting with him, which means nobody's safe, including Walker. And it's wild to consider because Walker's really good and really young. But if the Jazz land Cooper Flagg, what does next year look like?
Yeah, if you're looking at the 2026 draft, I'd say that next year is probably going to look a lot like this year. And if you think about other really young players, I think, it's not a stretch. I don't think that this is a hot take to say that Cooper Flagg is not as good as Victor Wembanyama. And the Spurs, it's not like they made the playoffs in Victor's first couple of years. And yes, Victor's out for the rest of the season, and there was some health issue there. But we've also seen that you can very easily sit players a number of games and tank your way into another lottery situation. And so I would expect for the Jazz to continue to want either AJ DeBansa, Darren Peterson, maybe Cameron Boozer, if they can get into the top 3 of the 2026 draft. That's what I fully expect. And if you have Cooper, Lowry, Walker on the same team and it looks like it's going to be too good, then you probably have to get rid of one of those players. Or you have to really, really manage the injury report in even a more remarkable way than the Jazz have done this season. Right now, that's what I expect to happen. If the Jazz were to get Cooper Flagg, I don't expect for them to try to start getting into the playoffs right away. Probably wouldn't be able to do that with Cooper Flagg and this roster anyways. And so I would expect for more moves to be made and for the Jazz to try and get into the lottery again next year.
Cody Williams is 20 years old, and, he is a young player on a team that's not serious about winning, so I'm not trying to judge him too harshly. I'm just trying to be honest about what you would like to see from a player drafted where he was drafted, and he spent some time with the Stars, and there were some bright moments, but not enough. When you have a top 10 pick, if you send him down to the G League, you want 30 and 15 every night. You want him to dominate. And he's received more playing time as of late, and it just hasn't looked good. What's fair to say, year one, 20-year-old Cody Williams, and have you changed your calculus on who he can be in this league?
I have. I was probably a lot higher on him before, and during the draft process and coming into this season, what I've seen is it's really rough. Like there's not really any way to sugarcoat that. It's been a really rough season for Cody, and I think that some of the things that you thought about him during the draft process, right? Like he's able to kind of disappear during a game, but not in a negative way, make an impact, do really smart things, but still score and just look very smart and not look like he was trying to take over, but still making all of the right moves. That's kind of the player profile that he had coming into the season. And I think that the problem is that now Cody Williams disappears during a game and not in a positive way. He just like doesn't make an impact more often than not. And the shooting is concerning because of how inconsistent the shooting is. I mean, there's a lot of air balls. There's a lot of times that he's, hitting off the backboard or front rimming. It's not like, if he was consistently missing and he was hitting back rim all the time, then you'd say like, you make some minor tweaks. But because the misses are so inconsistent, then that the shot is concerning. And yeah, I think that as it stands right now, I see Cody Williams, and like you said, it's a bad year, a down year, a bad team, and so you don't want to make it all about him. And so I want to give him benefit of the doubt and like give him a little bit of grace in the situation and say that like I really hope still that he can develop. And I think that an off season where he's really working on his body is really going to do him a lot of favors because probably his biggest flaw is that he lacks strength. But there needs to be a lot of work done in a lot of areas for Cody Williams. And right now he looks like a project, and I don't know what the project looks like when it's completed.
All right, Sarah, last thing for today. Since you and I last spoke, it became official. Alex Jensen hired as the 17th head coach in Utah men's basketball history. As a media member that had a front row seat during Alex's time with the Jazz, what would you say to Ute fans about what you witnessed as far as his ability to develop talent?
Yeah, I'd say his ability to connect with players is really impressive, and that's probably one of the biggest attributes about Alex Jensen. Not just players, his ability to connect with anyone. He was incredibly kind and generous with his time with me while he was with the Jazz, and even after that, seeing him in Dallas, he has continued to be kind, and players love him and they gravitate towards him and they appreciate the wealth of knowledge that he has. And I think that with any coach that's coming from the NBA ranks and going to the college ranks, they can offer that is a really impressive package for any sort of recruit that's looking at where they can learn what it takes to get to the next level. Well, Alex Jensen has that knowledge. And so I think he's going to do a great job, and I've got a lot of high hopes.
Sarah, thanks for the time. Enjoy the weather, and we'll get you back on soon, okay?
All right. Talk soon, Spence.
All right, Sarah Todd, Deseret News, brought to you today by IFA Country Stores. Excuse me. Any drive to the basket begins with the first step. Now, look outside. It's like 65 degrees and clear. So if you've been ignoring your lawn care, now's the time to dial it in. So our good friends at IFA Country Stores, any drive to the basket begins with the first step on the court. That's the ultimate power move. And IFA's Step 1 crabgrass preventer and their lawn food is the first choice to give your yard the healthy green look that you admire. The neighbors will be green with envy. Shop IFA online at ifa.coop or stop by one of their neighborhood stores today. 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. 5 o'clock hour of the program comes your way. On the other side, on ESPN, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, we are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. All right, let's get it. Drive at 5 time, Monday afternoon. 7 minutes past the hour, 5 o'clock. About 62 degrees, clear and sunny here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. And the weather is going to be great for most of the week. Cool down a little bit throughout the course of Friday, Saturday, coming up on the weekend. But we're looking at 67 tomorrow, 72 on Wednesday, 73 on Thursday. So spring appears to have arrived. Now, if you're new to our market, we might get hit with a massive snowstorm in April. Hell, maybe even May or June. You never know. But happy Monday to you. Hope you had a great weekend, and it's great to have you along for the ride. The 5 o'clock hour of the program tonight is brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. Springtime is here, and baseball season is officially underway. Don't miss your chance to add your favorite players from the diamond in your Prize Picks lineup, whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, or first inning runs. Take your pick of more or less for your shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. On Prize Picks, you can mix and match player projections from different sports. Combine your favorite baseball players with players from basketball, hockey, esports, and much more. If you download the Prize Picks app today and use the promo code ESPN700, you get $50 when you play that first $5 bet. Don't even need to win the bet to get to $50. So download the Prize Picks app today for free, App Store, Google Play Store, and use the promo code ESPN700 at checkout, and you'll get $50 when you play that first $5 bet. Of course, the madness of March dominated the landscape of the weekend as BYU marches on to the Sweet 16 for the first time since Jimmer Fredette was playing basketball down in Provo. And they're going to take on Alabama coming up on Thursday at 5:09 in Newark, New Jersey at the Prudential Center. 5:09 Mountain Time. That game is on CBS. The line opened as Alabama a 5.5-point favorite and pretty quickly moved the way of BYU. Now, as of now, it's settled at 4.5 points. Alabama went to the Final Four a year ago. They're very, very powerful offensively. They're well coached. They've got a couple of pros on their roster and some upperclassmen leaders who, like I said, have a Final Four experience. They lost to UConn a year ago. It was a great game in the Final Four. Mark Sears, senior point guard. Grant Nelson, a senior forward. Two players you probably watched play a year ago. Both of these teams like to get out and run, but nobody plays faster than Alabama. Alabama is the highest-paced offensive team in all of college basketball. So Nate Oates, their head coach, highly sought after, and Bama has had a great run under him. And so for BYU fans out here, this is a next-level game for Brigham Young. All due respect to Wisconsin. Wisconsin was not an elite athletic team, and BYU needed a historic offensive performance to win that game by 2. Now, they got it, so credit them. BYU became the first team in NCAA tournament history to post offensive numbers like they posted against Wisconsin, a team that shot 49% from the floor, 46% from three, 93% from the line, and scored over 91 points with 11 turnovers. That's never happened. Also 21 assists. They out-rebounded Wisconsin 41-32. And so it's going to be a next-level game that will require a level of strength and athleticism that has bothered Brigham Young in the past so far this year. When you look at those next-level athletic teams, namely Houston, who embarrasses everybody. So we'll see if BYU can get it done. You've got to give Kevin Young a lot of credit year one. 26 wins year one for a BYU coach is a record. And, on to the Sweet 16 for BYU. And so the madness of March continues starting on Thursday. Some really, really good matchups coming up. We've got Auburn and Michigan. We've got Ole Miss, Michigan State. As I referenced, BYU, Alabama. Should BYU shock the world? Well, I'm not going to go that far. This would not be a shock the world scenario. They'll probably get Duke in the Elite Eight. Duke is going to take on Arizona. Arizona was able to get by their old Pac-12 foe, Oregon. It's odd to say, hey, Big 12, Big 10 matchup, Arizona, Oregon, but we saw that over the weekend. Duke ran by Baylor. Baylor got by Mississippi State. And as I've been talking about on the show today, if you are a Jazz fan wondering why the Jazz are doing what they're doing, I would encourage you to watch Duke, as Cooper Flagg is still kind of hobbling a bit with that ankle injury, but he looked really good against Baylor. So we'll see what Duke, Arizona has to bring. It's Houston, Purdue in the Midwest region there. And Houston, Purdue, the winner of that game, will march on to play the winner of Kentucky, Tennessee. Texas Tech, Arkansas, and then Florida, Maryland. That's your West matchup. And we have no Cinderellas left. We're in the Sweet 16, and there are 0 Cinderellas left. Do not sell me on Arkansas as a Cinderella. John Calipari has a roster with potentially 4 NBA players on it. They simply could not get healthy all year, and they started the season off horribly. But if you watched Arkansas St. John's, unfortunately was my pick to go to the Final Four. Arkansas looked like the superior team. And St. John's was one of the best defensive teams in all of college basketball. Did not bother Arkansas at all. So Arkansas, even though they're a 10 seed, this is not a Cinderella. And I would not be stunned if they march past Texas Tech and go to the Elite Eight, where they're going to play the winner of Florida, Maryland. Florida, UConn, great game over the weekend. UConn back-to-back defending champs. 13 straight games without a loss in the tournament for UConn. That's quite a run, but it does come to an end at the hands of a really good Florida team. Florida's just one of those teams, and I make the mistake every year of just latching onto a team that whenever I watch them, they're just awesome. And that's been Florida all year long. That was a good game against UConn. Maryland provided the only buzzer beater we've experienced so far in the tournament, and they needed it to get by Colorado State, who was carrying that Mountain West Conference banner, as Ken Pom talks about all the time on the show. If you're a Mountain West Conference fan, the fact of the matter is it has not been great in the tournament. Utah State fans know that. So we got 4 games Thursday, 4 games on Friday as the madness of March continues. Utah Jazz are off tonight. They're going to welcome in the Memphis Grizzlies coming up tomorrow. Utah Hockey Club is in action tonight. They're taking on Detroit. I hate to break it to you, if you're a fan of the Utah Hockey Club, it is not happening. They're 6 points back of the wild card, and honestly, this is less their fault than it is just the St. Louis Blues catching fire all of a sudden. So, have stranger things happen? Sure. But as we look at the landscape right now, Minnesota has the first wild card spot, and they've got 85 points. St. Louis has the second wild card spot, as they've won 6 straight. They have 81 points. Now, Utah does have 2 games in hand on St. Louis, but Calgary and Vancouver find themselves ahead of the Utah Hockey Club as of now. I said it about 2 weeks ago. In the landscape of pro hockey, 3 or 4 points with 15, 16 games left doesn't sound like a lot, but it actually is. And it was the failure of the Utah Hockey Club to win games at home and close out games they were leading into the third period earlier in the season that ultimately kind of caught them a little bit. So it's been great to have NHL hockey here in the market, but I don't think we are going to see Stanley Cup playoff hockey here in Salt Lake. But the Hockey Club is in action tonight. It's kind of a quiet night in the landscape of sports as we are awaiting the return of March Madness coming up on Thursday. Full slate of NBA games. Starting right now, the T-Wolves and the Pacers. Lakers Magic in action. It's the Raptors and the Wizards. Tankapalooza. Mavericks Nets at Barclays, and for some reason Anthony Davis is playing tonight. Find that kind of odd. Sixers, Pelicans, Bulls, Nuggets, Bucks, Suns, Celtics, and Kings as well. So a little pro basketball tonight, of course, a little hockey as well. Spring football rolls along up on the hill for the youth. Started last Thursday. If you miss any of the media availability, Coach Witt, Jason Beck, Morgan Scalley, a grip of players, Smith Snowden, Logan Fano, and others, go to ESPN700sports.com for all of that. If you are looking for Utah football sound, Big 12 Pro Day last week in Frisco saw 25 combined Cougars and Utes in action. 13 Utes, 12 Cougars. So a little college football, a little pro football offseason as well. But obviously it is the madness of March that has everybody's attention, and the tournament will resume coming up on Thursday. All right. All right, wrapping up the show for a Monday afternoon, final segment of the day today. I will be on television tonight with one Dave Fox, who is the only person I know that has 2 Pelotons and 2 Emmys. It'll be at 10:35 on KMYU. We call it 5 Questions with Spence. We'll do some college basketball. We'll do some spring football. We'll do some jazz, some hockey club, maybe a little RSL. Didn't do any RSL today. RSL went down a man in the first half out in Sandy on Saturday. And it was a rough call for sure. And then the goal that Dallas scored looked to be offsides. I was out there at the game. It's always fun to go say hello to all my old friends out of Real Salt Lake. But it did not look good for the soccer club as they continue to struggle to start the season. So there you go. Little 5 Questions with Spence tonight, 10:35 on KMYU. Looks like Sean Miller's leaving Xavier to take the Texas job. It's always the time of year once teams are ousted in the tournament. Some of these coaches get good jobs. We pontificated on the possibility of Mark Harlan talking to Nico Medved from Colorado State. Well, Nico today lands the Minnesota job. It's kind of the deal with the ecosystem in college coaching. You take a smaller team to good heights, and then a P4 school hires you, and you become rich overnight. Puka Nacua went on a podcast and said he wants to retire at the age of 30. Right now, Puka is 23, and he'll be in his 3rd year. That would be 9 years of pro football. And, getting a lot of attention today. Puka Nacua on a podcast said he wants to retire at the age of 30. You get it. I think a lot of these golfers, I'm looking at the golfing leaderboard. A lot of these football players are retiring a little bit earlier. Victor Hovland, speaking of golf, won the Valspar over the weekend. Justin Thomas with a 2nd-place finish. Let me ask you a question, Porter, before we say goodnight.
Yes, I'm trying to retire at 30.
So you're 30 now.
Exactly.
You're behind the 8 ball,
Sorry,
man.
Just to give you a fair warning, I'm trying to retire at 30.
Do you have revenue streams I'm not aware of?
Maybe, but not
right.
enough to retire.
Okay. Hey, I wouldn't blame you. I want to retire now, but you got to pay bills and stuff.
Yeah, we'll see. Probably not going to happen this year, but I'll at least keep you in the loop there.
So Tiger Woods over the weekend sends out a social media post to confirm that he's now dating Vanessa Trump, who was married to Donald Trump Jr., who seems like a sweet man. In a lot of ways, well-adjusted. And then he adds the following on his post on both X, Twitter, Instagram. He said, quote, "Love is in the air, and life is better with you by my side. We look forward to our journey through life together. At this time, we would appreciate privacy for all of those close to our hearts." I don't know nothing about nothing, but if you wanted privacy, would you just not post? Like, if privacy is really what you wanted, wouldn't you just not send out a social media post?
You probably would not send out a social media post about dating a Trump. Like, just, regardless of which way you feel about it, it's you usually keep it close to chest. But hey, he's Tiger Woods, and when you're doing that thing, you kind of either do things publicly or you wait until they become public, right? So I don't know. It's interesting. They can do what they want. Well, I'll watch the golf.
Yes,
they
can do what they want, but I'll see these videos randomly pop up on my feed or whatever where somebody's like, "Hey, well, I don't really want to do this, but I got to address the haters.
Respect my privacy."
And I'm like, I don't know who you are. I don't know what you're addressing. And now that you've done, you're making more people aware of whatever it is you were trying to keep private.
These are people who don't live in the same, I don't want to say reality, but ecosystem as folks like you and I, right? Like the real world. Tiger Woods has been a celebrity since he was a child, like an actual child, right? So I understand what you're saying. And you're right, but he doesn't know what that means. He doesn't understand what privacy is on a real scale. Tiger Woods doesn't even know what that is. So doesn't really know how to approach it, maybe.
The question that's been surfacing is, do you think Tiger's the one that sent that post out? Because it does not sound like something that Tiger Woods would say.
I was going to say that the post seemed out of place in that way, where it's like, was there like maybe some relationship stuff? They had to, do this for me, maybe. Because, yeah, like you said, it didn't seem like it was worded like one Eldrick would.
Just the very definition of privacy is to go about your business in private.
Yeah.
And therefore not post things online and then ask for privacy. It honestly reeks of attention is what it does, like an attention grab.
It absolutely does. But again, if you are a Tiger Woods or you are someone that grew up with the name, or I guess didn't grow up with the name Trump, but you are in that family, I don't know that privacy is what you're really looking for. You may claim that, but I don't think that's accurate.
I was also a little bit surprised that after Vanessa, our girl in this scenario,
friend of the show,
reach out to her. Effort Vanessa Trump.
Speaking of friends of the show, our guy Joe Gatto had himself a weekend.
Yeah. Practical Jokers, great show. I'm not touching that one. I don't know what happened, but Joe Gatto, friend of the program, did have a rough weekend. But after you split with Junior, wouldn't you change your name? Or do you want to keep the Trump moniker because so many people know who you are?
To your point, I mean, I'm not taking someone's name necessarily if I'm marrying them. I'm definitely not keeping it after I'm divorced. So unless you want something from that name, you're probably moving on from it. And if it's that one, maybe some notoriety, maybe some attention is what you're looking for.
Relationships are hard enough. I don't think you want that public pressure. And I got to say, I'm not one to talk here, but Tiger's relationship history, maybe go about it a different way. I think this is like the fifth or sixth, like it was Lindsey Vonn for a while, right?
Lindsey Vonn.
And then it was some woman who worked for one of Tiger's restaurants or something, and that didn't go well.
Yeah,
she tried to sue him.
I think it was someone that he had, let's just say, known while he was married, right? When it comes to Tiger, the golf is really good. The relationship stuff is maybe not. But like you, I am not the one to cast judgment in that direction.
Why don't we get out of here? Why don't we just say goodnight?
You don't like this segment?
No.
You want to expand on relationship stuff?
No, it's making me uncomfortable, and I gotta go. So
let's zoom out.
Let's not. It's time to go. So 10:35, Cam YU, Dave Fox, 2 Pelotons, 2 Emmys. We'll jump around all over the place. But Porter, what comes our way on a Tuesday edition of the program?
On a Tuesday edition of The Drive, we're talking a lot of hoops on a Tuesday. Tony Jones stops by the program. Tom Haberstroh stops by the program. Tim McMahon stops by the program. So you're getting your fill of basketball on a Tuesday. And then what you talk about with one Dave Fox, anyone's guess.
All right, there you go. So join us for a Tuesday show. We will say goodnight. And a special thank you to Josh Furlong, Spencer Linton, Jeff Johnson, as well as Sarah Todd. If you miss any of the sound from this program today, you have a couple of options. And reminder, you always have these options at your disposal. It's the beautiful thing about consuming media in the modern age with the digital ability to go to the website, which is ESPN700sports.com. Download the mobile app we use for the station. You can take us on the go. It's how I listen to the station. And then finally, for what we do specifically in our space, 4 hours every afternoon drive, we have a podcast page, which is called The Drive with Spence Checketts. And up there is every episode we've ever done. So if you just found us, you're like, hey, it's pretty good. You can go back 5.5 years and listen to thousands of episodes if you're really that bored. We call The Drive with Spence Checketts, available wherever you get your shows. Subscribe, rate, review, say nice things, give us all the stars. It helps. He's Porter. I'm Spence saying goodnight. Enjoy your Monday evening. Talk to you on a Tuesday drive. As always, you can find it right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network.